and welcome to this morning's meeting of the Scrutiny and Performance Committee. First item on the agenda is Sederunt and Apologies. For absence, I think there are 3 intimated. Rona, can I ask you to detail them?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Carruthers, who has a prior engagement, but he may be along later, and apologies from Councillors McCautry and Wiper.
Thanks very much indeed. Second item on the agenda, declarations of interest. Unlikely event, but any declarations they wish to make? No? Okay. Third item is the minutes of the meeting of the 18th of July for noting as a correct record. Can we confirm that that's the case? Thank you. Item number 4, scrutiny review, training and development. We have a presentation this morning by Dumfries and Galloway College, and their principal, Carol Turnbull, is here to make a presentation, accompanied by Helen Pedley, head of HR of the organisation. Welcome to you both. Take it away as you wish. Thanks.
Right, that's okay. I'd just like to say thank you very much for inviting us this morning, and we very much welcome the opportunity to come in and talk to you about training and development.
Under pressure.
I know.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. As I was introduced, I'm Carol Turnbull, and I'm principal of the college and have been for 1 year exactly. And Helen Pedley's come along, who's our director of HR. So I thought a very brief presentation just about the college and the range of training and development we do, and then Helen's going to talk through how we actually organise our training and development in the college. So I hope that's okay, Chair. Thank you very much. Slightly different from how we do it. Okay, so just some general college facts. In general, we enrol between 4,000 and 5,000 students per year. Of these, 1,600 are full-time students, and of the 1,600, approximately 20 to 25% study higher education courses, which are our HNCs, HNDs, Level 3 VQs, which are equivalent to first and second year degree courses. And we've built very close articulation links, particularly with the University of the West of Scotland. So many of our students who do HNCs or HNDs actually go directly into second and or third year of degree courses, so that it gives them a choice as to which kind of pathway they wish to study. We deliver courses from access level for people with no qualifications right up through the range from NC through to HNC, HND, and then degree courses. We have our 2 campus sites in Dumfries and Stranraer. Approximately 20% of our students study at the Stranraer campus. With 4 faculties covering a broad range of curriculum. As the only general FE college in the region, one of the challenges, but one of our strategic aims, is to maintain breadth of curriculum as much as we can, because we do recognise that if we don't offer particular subject areas, it can be difficult then for learners to access these across the region. As well as our full-time students, we deliver a range of modern apprenticeships, and we deliver a range of work-based qualifications. So we actually have staff who go out into business, into employers' premises, and deliver upskilling and work-based training. This year we've got approximately 80 plus modern apprenticeships, but we've delivered last year over 300 work-based vocational qualifications actually in the workplace. We also do industry-specific training, so we will develop bespoke training to suit an employer's needs. So it doesn't necessarily have to be nationally recognised qualifications that we deliver. One particular one that we have ongoing at the moment is with Scottish Power Energy Network, and it's regarding their distribution contracts, and we're working with all of the main contractors who have contracts in Dumfries and Galloway, and we're delivering an upskilling 14-week programme that guarantees a job, providing the people complete the course successfully. The company interviews and recruits the students at the start. They then take the training, and then they go straight into them. We have a programme to deliver this up until December 2014, and at the end of that there should be 85 direct positive job outcomes as a result. We've also started this year delivering a wind turbine technician programme, which will be an 18-month course. Again, this is being developed in partnership with the industry and with the employers, and we've also worked in partnership with Ayr College because of the significant wind farm developments in Ayrshire as well. And again, the contractor who currently has the maintenance programme will recruit students directly from the courses once we've finished and have been involved in the development. So we deliver nationally developed qualifications, generally to full-time students and part-time infill students, but we also develop a range of bespoke programmes and can tailor programmes to suit individual employer needs. Some new developments, in conjunction with university partners on the Crichton campus, a brand new degree in applied enterprise was developed in Dumfries and Galloway last year, and that enables students who have completed a higher national diploma programme to articulate onto the third year of a degree. And during this third year, they develop business and enterprise skills, but the project work they undertake is specific to the vocational area they've studied. So last year it was HND creative industry students, a lot of whom do go into self-employment, who then moved on, did the third year of the degree, developed the entrepreneurial and business skills, but the project work was all around the areas that they've studied in. This year there's 25 students from the college have enrolled on this, and we've extended that now to include sports and our health and some of our health and beauty students. So again, areas where people might tend to go into self-employment. Next year we're looking to develop an honours degree with the University of the West of Scotland, and longer term we would hope that we'd be able to offer, in partnership with the council and with UWS, business incubation and some nurturing opportunities for those who present a good business case in their honours degree and so on. We also have been doing some research projects. We are part of the Crichton Institute, which is being led by the University of Glasgow, which is about developing appropriate research and knowledge exchange for Dumfries and Galloway. And I know that the council is a key partner in that development too. We've undertaken some specific research with our employers, looking at issues around what we've called work readiness. We got some feedback from employers saying that students and school leavers were leaving school and college with perhaps appropriate vocational and academic qualifications, but not really having the right, what they called employability skills. So we did some work with them to identify what they meant by work-ready skills, if you like. And these have come out as things such as attitude to work, being reliable, turning up on time, being able to follow work instructions, being able to operate as part of a team, and so on. So it's what we call the softer kind of employability skills. So this year we're looking at how we can actually embed more of these into our full-time programmes, and in particular into our programmes where the students go out on work placement, which has been identified by both the employers and the students as being an actual essential part of becoming work ready, if you like. We've invested significantly in the last 3 to 5 years in digital and online technology, and through that we now have online application enrolment and online funding application processes, and feedback from the students has been very positive. They've been able to get their funding, etc., in place long before they actually start at the college, and therefore it's cut down on the time. We've also developed a number of online courses which can be accessed totally online, so people don't need to come into the college at all, although we do encourage some workshop sessions for networking, etc. We're piloting a PDA in accommodation management aimed at the hospitality and tourism industry, and this has been developed with employers and with the University of the Highlands and Islands, and went through Scottish Qualifications Authority validation last year, so it's now actually a national qualification. We're also piloting our High National Certificate in Social Care with over 20 local businesses. And again, it's a mixture of online and some attendance. And we're actually about to roll that out for a further 10 candidates this year. Our target is that 80% of our curriculum would be or will be available online. And this is obviously to try and overcome some of the geographic and travel issues that there are in a region as geographically dispersed as we have. But what we are finding out, which isn't really anything new, is that totally online only works for a very limited number of people. It requires a lot of self-discipline. So what we're looking at is what we call the blended model, which is a mixture of some online study and some attendance either at college or in a centre that we can use locally, so that people do get that actual social and business networking opportunity too. We have a project which is funded through Interreg, and we have partners in Northern and Southern Ireland, which is called CREST, and it is the Centre for Renewable Energy and Sustainable Technology. I got that right. Our part in it is we're working with small businesses in the region to help them diversify and develop products round about the micro-renewables. So just a couple of examples. We've got one business which is a fish farm in the region, and we're helping them identify how they can maintain constant water temperature through the use of renewable energy and so on. And we've got a number of projects like that which are ongoing. And this project is funded through to next year, but we are looking at ways of continuing this and making it sustainable longer term. I've talked to you about the wind turbine course. We've done upskilling programs for Lovels who work in the area. We've recently held an engineering recruitment event where we brought employers, school pupils, college students together and talked about the engineering industry, local opportunities for jobs, national opportunities, and through an expansion of our work experience programme, we're looking at where employers will take our students on work experience with a view to perhaps then taking them on, hopefully, on a full-time basis. It's a sort of try before you buy kind of experiment, but it takes some of the risk away from employers, and we're trying to encourage them to take on more young people, particularly. From next year, from August 2014, we will be reintroducing hospitality and catering at our Dumfries campus. We've always delivered this in Stranraer, but based on research with local employers, NHS, with the new hospital opening, Dumfries and Galloway Council and local employers, we've identified that there is a need for catering training, and so we are currently looking at designs for developing kitchen training facilities and training restaurant facilities as well. We're also developing an online PDA and HNC in management, which is a general management qualification, and as I said, I'm now going to hand you over to Helen, who will talk you through how we actually organise training and development for our own staff in the college. Okay.
Hello everybody. As Carol said, I'm Director of HR and one of my roles is responsibility for training and development across the college. We currently employ, I think it's about 295 headcount at the last time we had a look at that last month. And obviously economies of scale, it's a bit different for us in comparison to yourselves with an organisation of your size. We manage our budget centrally for staff development, and that's managed by myself. In terms of the budget, we have that divided into internal and external events, whereby a proportion is set up for staff who need to go out to do any development, could be teaching qualifications, etc. We also have a budget set aside whereby staff would do some staff development events internally. It may be through our own courses, where our staff are able to attend or apply and do, for example, an open learning course, or it may be something we actually provide internally and we bring external speakers in. In terms of identifying our training and development, this is done in a number of ways. We would normally set the priorities for the year ahead originally with the budget to try and determine what budget is left for additional staff development. So the things that I would tend to look at would be teaching qualifications, how many of our teaching staff are due to go through their teaching qualifications this year, and we actually have a contract with Dundee University, and they administer that for us, where our staff would attend Dundee for a couple of days at the start of the session, and then everything else is done remotely down here at Dumfries. We would identify whether there's any generic staff development that would need to be undertaken throughout the year, for example, equalities, data protection, freedom of information. And then the remaining budget would be left for staff development to be identified throughout the year, just on an ongoing basis. In terms of identifying that, we would look at business need, and that links to quite a lot of the information that Carol's already given in terms of the lines technician, the wind turbine, etc. And that has created a high demand from our staff for their upskilling to enable them to be able to deliver these new developments, moving towards online delivery, etc. And that has required quite a bit of investment in our staff so that they're able to actually deliver in this way. We have a process whereby all staff will undertake a staff development review, and that's done on an annual basis. It's done through various means. For our senior managers and managers, they would go through a full career development review, which would incorporate their staff development needs. The remaining staff would undertake a staff development review at present, which looks at their development needs in terms of the department, if there's anything new that would need to be done across the whole department, or whether it's on an individual basis. It may be the individual themselves have identified that they have a development gap that they need to look at, or that they're just looking to enhance their skills and abilities. So that discussion would take place with the manager, and a plan would be laid out for the forthcoming year as to how they would achieve that staff development. We would look at college-wide priorities, which may change year on year. Sometimes legislation has a big impact in that, depending on what we need to do. It may be that the manager themselves have identified a staff development need for that individual, just based on performance, etc., throughout the previous year, or roles change, etc. HR would monitor any requests that come through. So a copy of the staff development reviews are all sent to the HR department, usually by the end of the academic session. So we'll look for those to be complete usually towards the end of May, which would then enable the HR department to have a look through all of the staff development reviews, identify if there's any key themes, anywhere we can look at economies of scale, and either bring people internal to do a generic development event and try and avoid any duplication obviously try and make things a bit more cost effective for us in-house. In terms of the process for staff development, we have, some of our staff would say maybe a bit paper driven in one sense. We're trying to look at it more online. The individual member of staff would have a discussion with their manager around what staff development they're looking to do, and they would complete a staff development request form. Within this documentation, it identifies what the staff development event is, where it's to be, how much the cost is, if there's overnight accommodation, for example, if they're looking for time off from work to attend it. They would identify the objectives that they would expect to reach, and we look for SMART objectives from staff. It could just be one objective, there could be 3 or 4 depending on the actual event or the development they're undertaking. We would also look for the member of staff to identify measurement criteria. So, for example, it may be in 3 months' time I will have redeveloped course materials for something. And these are all discussed and approved with the line manager so that everybody's aware of what the objectives are of the staff development event and what the measurement criteria will be to decide whether that's been successful or not. Once the manager approves the staff development, it then comes to myself within the HR department, and then I would look to just review the request and either approve it or not. I have to say, in terms of any staff development requests, I think in the 9 years I've been at the college, potentially 2 or 3 events have been refused. And I would say in the main that's been due to cost, and it's been identified as not being essential. It's been a nice to have thing for them. They've maybe wanted to do a master's, for example. And I've said no, the budget just won't stretch that far, I'm afraid. In terms of the measurement criteria, what the HR department do is we follow up the measurement criteria as and when the dates were set on the form. So if, for example, the member of staff said 3 months or 6 months' time, HR would follow that up with the individual to say, you said you were going to do this by such and such a date, have you achieved it, and what has been the benefit? When we had an inspection by HMI 3 years ago, one of the areas they identified was how do we review our staff development and evaluate it in terms of the students' perspective and what's the benefits to students. So in terms of the review and the measurement criteria, we always ask the question, how will this development impact on our learners and how will it be a positive impact? Some of the departments found that quite difficult initially if they don't have a direct involvement with the learners, so for example the finance department, etc. But we're now finding more and more that they are making that link as to what they do does actually impact on the learners, albeit tenuous sometimes they do make that link. And all staff are required to complete an evaluation form following any staff development, whether that be an internal event or whether it be external. It may have just been something they've done on the job, if you like, throughout the process rather than a formal staff development event. And again, that allows us to evaluate when staff are going out to decide whether or not we've got value for money in relation to the staff development, and whether or not we also ask the question if it's beneficial for other staff. And quite often staff have gone out to do something, come back and said, well actually I think the whole college would benefit from this, or I think the whole department should attend this event, or can we arrange for speakers to come in internally and do this. We would also look to utilise the skills and experience of our own staff. So if they've been to an event, can they come back and share the good practice and share what they've done, again trying to look at efficiencies, also from a financial point of view. Then we use the skills and abilities that we have in-house and don't always have to bring someone, an external speaker in to do some staff development. So I'll pass you back to Carol.
Just to finish then, I just thought I'd give a brief summary of some of the work we already do with the council, and some opportunities I think that could be for joint working, which could be help achieve some of the economies of scale and efficiencies that you talked about. You can see from there that we do deliver some MA training. We do some work with care, social care and various parts of the council. And I've outlined there some opportunities that I think there could be in terms of going forward. As I said, for CPD, it can be qualifications or it can be tailored to meet individual or departmental or employer needs. And I also think that if we understood and agreed a training plan in advance with the council, we would actually commit some of our core funding to support the delivery of that, because we'd be able to do it in terms of setting our budget ahead. And then we could also actually, I think there are joint opportunities, particularly around perhaps some of the legislative training that's required around equalities, health and safety, diversity training, etc., etc. Really though, I just want to say that would welcome any discussion and conversation about how we could help and support you in terms of what it is that you want to do moving forward. Thank you very much, and I hope we haven't bored you too much. Thank you.
Far from it, Carol. I thank both Helen and yourself for what I personally, and I'm sure colleagues would agree, it's been an interesting, not to say stimulating presentation. We have a number of questions here, and we'd like to put these to you. And hopefully there'll be room for supplementaries in the back of these. I think the first question, Ted, was allocated to yourself.
Okay, you've already touched on the fact that you do some work with us, as an organisation, and you've actually indicated in some cases that, you could do more. Would you sort of care to expand on that?
Okay, thank you. One of the challenges we find is we don't really know who we should be speaking to. Sorry, I have to be because you don't have a kind of centralised, the council doesn't have a centralised training development budget, then we sometimes get approached by departmental managers, but it's very difficult for us to get information out or know who we should send information to about some of the new opportunities, some of the new developments and so on that come along. So knowing who to speak to is one of the challenges for us, and I guess in a sense that's the biggest challenge for us, because if we understood better what the training development needs were, then we would work harder and much more closely to make sure that we were delivering or having, at least having that discussion to know what we could be doing with you.
Yeah. Well, you've touched on the fact that you're not sure about who you would contact. There's actually a couple of gentlemen just behind you there that, you might wish to actually contact. The council does actually do some training in a departmental sense, but they also have a central unit, and there's a chap there behind you, so perhaps you want to network with him, once you've actually finished this part of the process. I was really interested though to understand, you mentioned a couple of areas. I think one of them was diversity training, for example, but are there other areas that, specifically you think the college could play a role in?
Well, there is. We do a lot of our legislative training now is online, so we purchase licences, and I think the council maybe does something similar. So there's equalities, diversity. I certainly think in areas such as care, now we are working with the council and with the universities on developing a new re-ablement qualification there, but also in terms of possibly more CPD type activities around perhaps management and care, which are actually tailored to the council needs as opposed to following a generic type of qualification. I think perhaps around some of the areas as motor vehicle engineering, computing and IT, to be honest, across the range of areas, I think there are opportunities. And I have had discussions with Dan previously, so I have met before. I think it's fair to say we've probably not progressed too far with those discussions, but we are aware and we have had some initial discussions.
Okay, thank you for that.
Leonard, did you wish to add anything?
No, I think in terms of acknowledging the issues around who to speak to because of the devolved nature of the budgets around the departments, there are individual training leads within individual departments, and that's a feature members have already seen, I think, in terms of some of the workshop sessions have had and will have as well, so it's probably something you want to explore further in those sessions.
Thank you. The next question, Stephen, is yourself.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, in a way you've already sort of alluded to the process and staff development reviews, etc., in terms of identifying training, but it was really, I mean, you touched on a number of things to do with people attending events, peer sharing amongst peers in terms of information brought back, and managers maybe assessing where there's gaps required, but in a sense, what do you find are the most effective means of identifying training, given that you've got this number of staff looking at their own training and also management, and how do you ensure implementation?
In terms of identifying the staff development, I wouldn't say one's more efficient than the other, whether it comes from the individual or from the manager. The fact that we have this joint discussion seems to work well, and staff expect to have this staff development review. They know at least once a year they will have their development reviewed. But I continually receive requests throughout the whole year. It's just an ongoing process. May, June, July time, I'm inundated with requests because everybody's just had the review, so there's quite a lot comes in then. But we find that throughout the year, staff are continually looking at what they do, how they do it. As you're aware, roles continually change, development needs are continually changing throughout the year. But we find it seems to be a fairly effective process, and in terms of identifying whether it actually happens or not, that's whereby when we introduce this issue of the measurement criteria and the fact that the HR department follow that up, we do have the sort of like the process to close the loop, because that was one of the areas when HMI visited that they said, how do you close this loop and know that it's happened? And we also, with our learners, particularly when it's teaching staff that are undergoing the staff development, we ask the learners. So if we know there's been generic CIT, training and development for the teaching staff, we will ask the learners when we do a learner voices process to say, have you seen things change in the classroom? Are the teaching staff using a blended approach? Are you doing things online? Are you doing quizzes? Or is it just the traditional chalk and talk? And we're getting that feedback, which then in turn goes back to the departments again and gives us a good all-round evaluation towards the end of the year as to how the process has evolved.
Thank you. Well, it's in a way you've kind of preempted my follow-up question, which would have been about measuring the success or the effectiveness of the training, and obviously you've touched on the HMI input and the impact on learners, and obviously, as you also alluded to, the budget. So I suppose if you're staying within budget, as well as getting this feedback from the learners, but are those the only ways you would measure the effectiveness of the training?
We would also look at it through performance in terms of individuals. Has it changed the way that they're delivering their jobs? We have recently introduced four new posts in the college, and we've called them Learning and Teaching Mentors, and that's to help assist our teaching staff or any staff who are involved in delivery. And these members of staff will be attached to each member of staff will be attached to a mentor who will go in and visit the classrooms, for example, if they're in delivering to students, and they will go in and they'll review, almost a peer review process, to see how they're working with the students. They will also be aware of what staff development that individual has had, so they'll be able to look for signs. Are they using it? Have they changed? Are we seeing improvements, enhancements? Within support staff functions, again, it's down to the performance within the department. We would look at that and evaluate that, evaluation from line managers. We would also receive feedback from the individual members of staff as to whether they feel it has actually improved their knowledge or skills. We recently, Carol alluded to online training. We recently introduced last year compulsory online training for all staff, and we looked at 3 key areas where equality and diversity, data protection, safeguarding and health and safety was an optional requirement. And looking at cost, etc., we purchased licence for staff, and it worked out £9 per head for each member of staff to undergo this training. We've now got 95% of our staff have been through that. The feedback that we've had from staff has all been excellent. Without exception, I've not had anybody come back to say that it wasn't appropriate or effective, that it's increased their knowledge base, and it didn't take a long time to do, and we found it's been one of the biggest benefits that we've had this year, because staff felt 30 minutes to do something online, or an hour. Each of the courses, it's modular, and it gives you an example. It should take approximately 60 minutes. The health and safety takes approximately 3 hours. But staff have given really positive feedback, and we're now seeing signs when they're being asked questions, because it's all tested at the end of it and you must pass the test, etc. And they can do it several times, and it's not the same test, it does change every time you repeat it. But even just in terms of their knowledge base, we're seeing the evidence of that and the improvement of that area as well.
Jill, the next question's yours.
Thank you. Actually, before I ask my question, I just want to say that I was particularly pleased with the presentation you gave, and I feel far more informed as to what the college actually does, and going forward as well with the courses that you've brought online as well. I think that was very useful for me in particular anyway. So I'd just like to thank you for that. I found it very interesting. I was going to ask a question to do with catering for training needs of staff and the objectives, etc., but I think actually you've covered that already. However, I'm particularly keen to ask and maybe explore a little bit more, it's probably off-piece for my question actually, so apologies, Chair, to do with the joint working. And particularly you mentioned about core funding and the opportunities that you would like to explore with the council, and how you could put some core funding in to actually explore and maybe do a sort of joint programme. And I just wanted to explore that a little bit more. I just wondered if you could give me some information on that.
I'll try, and thanks for the feedback, because you're never sure when you've come to these whether what you've presented is the right thing or not, so thanks for that. My thinking really is that if there is an overall training plan agreed for a coming year, an academic session in our terms, and we knew and we had agreed what training we would deliver on behalf of the council, and in what areas, and to roughly how many people, then when we receive our core grant funding, we would actually take some of that and allocate it specifically for that purpose, so that that could be used to support the delivery. So let's say that we agreed in 1 year we were going to deliver, let's just take half a dozen programmes, some full-time, some part-time, some one-day courses. We could work out, in a sense, how much then of our budget we could actually then allocate to support those costs. When it comes in ad hoc, to a certain extent, we've allocated our budget already. So anything else coming in either has to be done at a full cost to the company, if you like, or we have to try and find ways of infilling them onto existing courses so there's no additional cost to us. So a planned approach to me would actually allow us to work together on deciding what that plan should look like. And then we can say, well, we can put X amount of our funding towards the delivery of those courses, because the delivery of those courses would generate activity which we then count and have to count as part of our programme too.
Can I come back? Is that okay? Thank you for that. I think that's a very important factor in our discussion that we've had today, and I think it's something that the council needs to take on board. The only thing I would say about that is that if we were actually putting together a training course that was obviously of benefit and maybe catered to a council need, if there was any other outside organisation that would benefit from that as well, I'm presuming that they would be able to, there would be some sort of partnership that could take place and that other people could actually join that course, because I think that's of vital importance. That, I mean, bespoke courses for the council may also be of interest to other organisations within Dumfries and Galloway.
Yeah. Yes, and we've actually done that in the past through various groups within the council, and they've brought in, sometimes it's third sector partners and so on to access that. We just need to be careful in terms of our funding, and in actual fact widening it out would help, because if we deliver a programme, a bespoke programme for one employer only, we can't use our core grant to support that. But if it was open, if it was a programme that was open to council employees and others, then that would be different, and we would be able to use our programme. So actually widening opportunities would work for both yourselves and for us in terms of being able to access that funding.
Thank you, and thank you for your indulgence, Chair.
No problems. Anyone else get any other points they want to make as a supplementary to that question or to the answers? My apologies, Andy, for missing your request to get involved in the previous question. Forgive me. Okay, well, if no one has, can I suggest then we move on to the next question, which is yours, Leader?
Echo Jill's points that you answered a lot of the questions actually that we've got, that we've wanted to ask you. I think one of the things I've noticed from being in the community planning partnership is there's a lot of private sector, third sector and independent sector providers out there, as well as ourselves. Have you got linkages into those that you can develop or give us some insight into? And can Dumfries and Galloway Council training practice be enhanced through insights into that experience that you have with other providers?
We do work with some of the private training providers in terms of joint provision, and I'll give you one example. We work with Minerva training on some things, and actually Tricia Hunter and myself are developing a proposal to take to Skills Development Scotland that would be piloting a joint modern apprentice with somebody undertaking an HNC. So we would deliver the HNC part, and Minerva would deliver the modern apprentice part, if you like. I'll be honest, we don't have an awful lot, and Tricia and I have been working for the last 2 years really to try and identify a joint project, because we're very keen to be seen that we work together and that it's not about competition. Competition's not necessarily a bad thing, either for the customer or even for us in terms of quality and so on. But recently we were involved in a project called South of Scotland Business Solutions, and part of that was where we worked with individual employers, and we made a commitment that if we, and that was all of the partners involved, couldn't deliver something to meet their need, then we would find somebody who could. And we would then make that link. Now, they weren't committed to using that person or organisation, but our commitment wasn't that we turned around and said, well, I'm sorry, we can't, none of us can do that, I'm sorry. Our commitment would be that we would help find somebody then who could just make the link, and then it was still down to the business of the employer whether they wanted to go forward with that particular individual. So we've acted as a kind of brokerage kind of service as well on the odd occasion, and that worked very well. And we've also in some cases actually referred people to Scottish Enterprise, or even the Economic Development or the More Choices, More Chances groups, depending on what the individual needs were. So not a huge amount of examples of where we work with private training providers, but we very much see ourselves as being a partnership organisation. I don't know if that helps or not answer your question, Ivor.
There's a sort of follow-up to it, and maybe it's the same, maybe the same answer. Following up from that one, do you think there should be a public sector training partnership involving all community planning partners? And this is a bit, might come back to the part, just the brokerage part. What would you like to see as its function?
I think from a community planning partnership point of view, to me it's all about workforce development. It's understanding labour needs and future labour needs and workforce development needs, so that it would allow all partners to plan. So it's been able to see over the horizon a little bit and understand better what developments are coming along, whether there's any new industries coming, what the council's development needs, for instance, would be in the future. And it's having that discussion. So it's really, to me, community planning from a trained development is understanding the region. And that's not easy to do in a region made up of predominantly micro businesses who find it very difficult themselves to see a year ahead, never mind say I'm going to need people in 2, 3, 4 years. But I think by understanding what's going on better in the region together, then from my point of view, our role is to support that economic development through skills training, but only by knowing what the skills training is going to be can we do it. And in some cases it takes us a bit of time to get the skills in place for us to be able to do that.
It's possibly another follow. One of the things you said you've actually brought on this year, or you're looking to bring in, was the hospitality and sort of catering thing, whereby you're going to have to look at how you can fit it into the college buildings or whatever needs to be done. Is there no way as community planning partners, we have, maybe the council has facilities or the hospital has facilities, whereby you could use their facilities to help you deliver the courses, rather than having to actually build a new facility or adapt a facility?
I have had some discussions with the chief exec around this, and we've looked at it. From our point of view, when we developed the new building, we identified a classroom that has all the services going into it, because we always had the plan that longer term we would want to put it back on again. There's an awful lot of advantages to actually being able to have it on site, and that's about the wider student facilities, so it's access to library, IT, online training, etc. We have had discussions with NHS, and that was one of the strong reasons for actually making the decision. And although we wouldn't be using their premises, they have said that they would look to perhaps donate some of their equipment to us from the old hospital when they move to the new one. So wherever we can, we are maximising that. And I was also very keen to make sure that what we were doing wasn't going to be duplicating any other potential developments that were coming along as well.
John and Andy.
Thank you. Just on the back of that, I'm presuming that the organisations, for instance NHS and the council, etc., and other businesses within Dumfries and Galloway, you would use their facilities to look at work placements and giving some work experience to the students, although we would cater for the catering course on the college site, which I think probably is the right way forward, especially when the learning facilities are all in the one place.
I'm just picking up actually the bit about the catering and you know, is the intention to go back to the old formal route, training people for employment, or are you also looking at the potential of becoming a partner with the NHS and the local authority in health and wellbeing? And actually we have a whole generation who don't know how to cook from scratch. You know, they think tatties come from Tesco's, you know, they don't grow in a field. And you know, have you done any work to explore that?
The answer is yes to all of those. Yes, we want to deliver formal qualifications, but we've also spoken to businesses about potential for master classes in particular areas, and looking at opportunities for cooking on a budget, one-pot suppers, all these kind of things which we would deliver to our own students and also to the university students who come to the Crichton campus as well. So I would want to see it as very much a mixture of all of these things, some formal qualifications, part-time, full-time. Certainly work placement will be an integral part of those, and yes, the council and NHS have already said that they would be keen to work with us on that going forward. And also some more informal type of classes, and potentially even some kind of fun classes for communities, you know, I don't know, bread making. Let's just take National Bake Off now that it's so popular, you know, bread making or cake making classes as well. So I would really hope that we would be able to offer a mixture of all of these things.
Thank you. Marianne, the next question is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Can I also say that I've enjoyed your presentation? Thank you. My question is, are you aware of any good practice examples from around the country where local authorities and educational institutes are working together?
I know of some. I know that Borders College, for instance, run an HNC in social work just specifically for the council over there. And I know that in, I think it's West Lothian, they have an arrangement similar to the one I talked about before about agreeing a kind of training budget and plan on an annual basis. And then the college is then committed to supporting that training. And I think in some areas, because some of the colleges have merged and changed recently, but I think it was Kilmarnock College actually undertook assisting their council with things like training needs analysis and so on, as well as actually developing the training plan. But certainly my sense is that in some other regions there is much closer working relationship between the statutory body that's there for skills training and the local authority, and I would really like to hope that we could perhaps work with you on doing what we do better for you going forward.
Want to come back? No? Okay. No other supplementaries? Next question then is yours, Andy.
Thanks, Chair. I think every once again has been asked and answered all the way through, but it was basically it was about the gaps in provision and stuff like that. Yeah, there was a bill that I picked up earlier and I tried to get in. So, with your indulgence, Chair, I'll do it now. No, don't worry, I'll be apologising for quite a while, right? No, it was the cultural thing where in your CPD. I think we could maybe learn from your experience, and it was particularly about the online training for the staff. But the question I was going to ask you about it is, how do your faculty stroke department deal with the conflict when it comes to staff training and the student learning experience? How do you cope with that?
Can you just repeat that again there, the staff training and...
Between the staff training that's required and being identified and needed, yeah, and having the student learning experience not suffer because of the need for training the staff. Now I'm going to make an assumption here, and I'm probably wrong, is that online training is done during their working day. Right? Is that...
Yes and no.
Absolutely. So that's the question. So there's obviously a part of this training is voluntary then from the staff in their own time, and part of it is obviously you're setting aside time in their working day to do it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, what we have is a process of when if we take the online training for example, that was done in the main during staff time. Some staff chose to do it out with their working day, and that was their choice to do that. But in the main, staff have been able to complete it through the day, which was one of the key drivers for the package that we bought, because it was short, sharp bursts. It wasn't taking a great length of time. The health and safety training, there's several modules within that, and that would take up to 3 hours roughly to do, and we said that was optional for staff. The equality and diversity, etc. For some staff it would be essential, but in terms of the modules that we had, we said it was optional for staff to do that, and we've actually found quite a large number of staff have actually done it, or done some of the modules within that they felt was relevant to themselves. The other modules were 30 minutes to complete. I think the longest took about 45 minutes, and we found that staff were able to do that within their working day. Within the conflict with the learner experience, if you like, in terms of teaching staff, for a full-time member of teaching staff, they teach for 24 hours out of their 35-hour week, so they have 11 hours within the week where they do their administration, and the likes of this training would be undertaken then. Where they have, if it's a formal training that's likely to be attendance at an event, or it takes a longer period of time to do, when that's identified, there's a discussion with the line manager as to how they would accommodate that. If they have a teaching commitment, for example, how would we do that? Sometimes teaching staff would swap around their timetables to accommodate it. Sometimes we would bring in additional staff, and we would, again, there would be the additional cost, but we would accept that actually we need someone to come in to free up that member of staff to go away and do the development events so that the students aren't affected by it adversely.
Jay, can you come back yet? So how do you deal then with the department stroke member of staff who falls behind?
In terms of, I can't say we've actually come across it as yet, touch wood. We've been quite fortunate so far. This is new in terms of the online development, but what we do is we would sit down with that member of staff and the manager would and have a dialogue around what are the reasons behind it. Is there a workload issue? Is there a reason why they're not able to fit it in? And we would look at a way of accommodating that so that they were freed up to do that. For example, we have a particular group of staff who are our work-based assessors who are not in college on a regular basis. They tend to do, because of the nature of their work, they're out there, they're working with employers, they're working with the candidates, and they only have a set number of hours just in terms of the contracts and the budget that we have. And what we did there was we actually agreed and said, right, this will take you 30 minutes to complete, this will take 45 minutes to complete. Effectively, they are doing it in their own time, but we agreed that they would submit a timesheet for that and be paid for the time that they would take to undertake this training. But it was agreed up front to say, this is how much time we're going to pay for you to do it. If it takes you slightly longer, then it takes you slightly longer. If you do it slightly quicker, then fair play. You've got a bit longer to do it, and we accommodated it that way.
Last question, Richard.
Thanks, Chair. I think you probably covered my question in your presentation. It was about the tourism industry, which is important to Dumfries and Galloway, and the curtailment of the hospitality courses. So I think we'd all like to congratulate and welcome the reintroduction of these courses and other courses in tourism. So thank you.
Well, before I bring Lorna in to sum up and perhaps endeavour to chart the way forward, let me thank you both for what has been an extremely worthwhile, not to say stimulating, presentation and particularly the responses to the questions. But on the basis, Carol, of one of your responses to Jill, you were saying you're always interested in feedback. Let me say that at the moment I'm particularly heavily involved with a stakeholder group, Mid-Galloway, and Scottish Power in relation to power supply issues in that part of the region. As Lewis Cronin, whom you'll be well aware of, was one of the contractors, was outlining at the last meeting the work that's in the process of being done and the training opportunities that are being provided, as it were, by the college or will be provided by the college. And let me say that the stakeholder group comprises of community representatives, primarily community council representatives, and they were extremely enthused indeed at that arrangement and the practical beneficial effect that would have to the economy of the region as a whole, but particularly to the western part, bearing in mind that you're talking about using the Stranraer campus for the provision of this training. So hopefully that feedback is also helpful to you. Anyway, on the back of that, Lorna, would you wish to sum up, highlight the salient points and perhaps chart the way forward for us?
Thank you, Chair. I think the main points, and I'm sure my colleagues will add to this, but I think the main points that in terms of the minute will reflect and also the documentation, I would summarise as that there are extensive opportunities for partnership in terms of training and extending the benefit mutually between both organisations, and I think that's been outlined today, and that might be an area that the committee itself wishes to pursue in terms of its investigations, and we should record that as part of that. And particularly, I think we've heard from the principal of the college about a clear plan in advance would assist the partnership development in terms of our training and development needs and where we could partner with the college, but extending that beyond just both of us and to the wider group of community planning partners, so that we horizon scan for all sectors around workforce development and help support the higher and further education sector's plan for that need into the future and also meet our needs as well. We've heard that the organisation of the council's training and development resources, the dispersed nature of that within the council can be a barrier at times in terms of that partnership on the ground, and that might be an area you wish to pursue as well in terms of your evidence and considerations. And that we've heard that there are examples out there, and I think we've taken note of them in terms of West Lothian, the Borders, and indeed Kilmarnock, although the college groups have changed names very recently in terms of those varying approaches to partnerships with further education provision in the area and how that might assist us in planning for our needs and in terms of delivery as well. And also that there's a wider benefit in terms of use of online or e-learning tools within an organisation, both in terms of efficiency and flexibility of that learning and how much it provides to the organisation, but also the potential for investment in that can also support perhaps reallocation or reduction in costs around training and development also. I think that was the main points that came through.
Well, with your leave and your agreement, colleagues, unless anyone has any further points they wish to raise or to make, can we proceed to section 2 of the report, which deals with the recommendations. 2.1 asks us to receive a presentation. We have done so, as I've already indicated, well worthwhile, and again I would thank both Carol and Helen for their attendance and, more importantly, their input, and secondly, to consider the information and evidence that this provides for the committee's review on training and development. Lorna has already given us basically what I would regard as a fulsome summing up. Any other points to add to this? No? Ted, sorry.
Just on the original part of your presentation, you know, where you talked about industry-specific training, and certainly on the overhead lines, you predicted that the outcome would be 85 jobs. Going on from there, you talked about a wind turbines type process. Have you any, and that was an 18-month course, is that correct? And have you any idea what the prediction would be for that in terms of jobs?
That's quite a difficult one because the contractor or the employer changes, if you like. But the current contractor has indicated that at a local level, all he said is he won't commit to numbers, but he has said that in terms of the number of recruits we've got, which is 17, that he would see positive job outcomes for them all. However, they may not all be local. So that's the only thing I would need to bear in mind. But he's not committed as such, Ted. He's just said that as far as he's concerned, yes, there are job opportunities for the current cohort we've got. Okay.
That's helpful, Carol. I suspect that information may surface elsewhere in another decision-making forum of the Council. Planning Applications Committee, to be precise. Well, thanks to you both, as I've said. You're welcome to stay if you wish. You're equally free to go if you wish, and we won't take offence if you decide to choose a latter alternative. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting us. I thoroughly enjoyed my first experience of appearing at committee. We'll go and let you get on with your business, so we'll just run round and get our coats from the other side. So thanks very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, colleagues, is item number 5. Again, part of the committee's review of training and development, and this time it's a presentation by the Society of Personnel Development Scotland. And my understanding is that Anne-Marie Johnson will be making the presentation too. Is that correct? Good morning to you.
Good morning. I don't have a presentation. I understood I was coming to answer some questions.
That's okay. No problems. Forgive the imprecision on my part. Well, we do have a number of questions. And on that basis, do you wish to, sort of preface, any preparatory remarks, or do you just wish us to go straight into the question and answer session, Anne-Marie?
Well, I can explain that I'm probably here in 2 roles. I am the Organisational Development Manager for Falkirk Council, so I can speak to you about our experiences within Falkirk Council and how we manage our learning and development. I'm also a member of SPDS and a member of the Executive Committee, so I can talk to you about what's happening sort of at a national level and work that we're doing with the Improvement Service.
Well, How do you feel, colleagues? I personally feel that would be helpful. As I say, if you want to give us a brief summation, if you can, or if you wish, before we go into question and answer, if that's it's a matter of yourself.
Well, I've got a copy of the questions that you had asked me to consider here, and one of the first things that I was asked to look at is what, in my opinion, does a modern progressive learning organisation look like? I think for me, it's about ensuring that the culture has got learning built into it. Individuals and line managers, who I think are key to that, have all got responsibility and ownership for their own learning and development. It's not about the training course culture that we've had for a number of years, where training sits out on a side and people dip into it when it's appropriate and then go back to the job. It's much more organic than that. It's much more about coaching, about action learning, about learning on the job, and very much about just-in-time training. We don't have the luxury of training people and not having the opportunity to put them into practice. And if it's not put into practice soon after the learning is very easily lost. It's about making sure that the learning is throughout the organisation and not just something that we do to somebody else. It's something that everybody has responsibility for.
Any comments, observations, the follow-up points you wish to make in that particular aspect? No? Marion? No? No? Okay. Well, can we just continue, since if you can work your way sequentially through the questions, or alternatively, if you feel... Sorry?
I said, if you've got the questions, then you might as well work through them rather than us just asking.
That's exactly the point I'm making. That rather that Suzanne Murray has the questions, to me it would make more sense for her to work sequentially through them, and we can come in on a supplementary basis, if we wish to do so. So please proceed as accords.
Thank you. Another question that was asked, do we have any good practice examples of how to deliver effective training as part of a coordinated workforce strategy, particularly in the context of decreasing budgets? Well, I've already alluded to the budget issue. I don't think that won't be on anyone's agenda. I think it's about being clear, what is it that the organisation is trying to achieve? So being absolutely clear what your own priorities are, and that's always quite a challenge for local authorities, because we've got such a diverse range of services that we need to deliver. But being as clear as we can, and which of these various services we have to deliver are the real priorities, and what is it that we need our people to be able to do? What sort of staff do we need to be able to do that? What's the knowledge, skills and attitudes that we need? And are they the same knowledge and skills and attitudes that we need right now going to be the same ones that we'll need in 5 to 10 years' time? Because you've always got to have your eye to the future. So your workforce strategy needs to be so closely aligned with the priorities, your single outcome agreements, your council goals, values, etc. And it has to be lived and breathed from the top down. I think it's important to consider as well what you want to do with your staff, or how you're going to be recruiting. Are you buying in the knowledge and skills, as in, are you going to recruit each time there's a vacancy, or are you planning to grow your own? So what is your turnover like? What is your workforce planning like? Looking at your demographics, your age profile. So it does mean looking at your workforce strategy linked to your priorities, and not looking at training development in isolation from any of that.
Yeah, you spoke there that none of us actually know what is actually going to happen in the future, and you talked about skills and attitudes. I was particularly interested in the attitudes part, because my experience in life has been that if you have the right attitude, you will adapt. So I'm not quite sure how you see that changing in some ways, or how you actually do something about a change of attitude and where it's relevant.
It's easy to give people skills, it's easy to give them knowledge, and it's not so easy to change their character traits and their attitudes. You could argue that it's very difficult to do that. And what I was suggesting there is that needs to be part of your workforce strategy, Are you going to be recruiting people into the organisation in the same old way that we did in the past, as in people who have got a lot of experience in a similar role and therefore they can deliver that role from a professional expertise area? Or are you going to look and recruit people from a character trait or from their attitudinal basis? If I think about first-line managers or middle managers, there's a really good example of that. Typically, we've had managers growing into these roles and being promoted into these roles for a number of years because they've worked in the department for a long time and they're a subject expert. And there are always challenges when we promote people into those roles because they don't necessarily have the leadership capabilities, and we've not always been good in the past at developing their leadership capabilities. But I think it's moved on even from that, in that all managers now, due to the budget constraints, are managing a far more diverse range of services. So their professional knowledge, if you like, is almost irrelevant because they have to be portfolio managers. So it's a different set of skills, traits, attitudes that they need to have. This ability to take on more, the resilience, the willingness to learn, the willingness to delegate and give responsibility to the others who are the professionals.
Jill and then Ivor.
Thank you. I mean, from my point of view, you're talking about cultures and behaviours there, and that's both within individual people, but also within an organisation as well. And, you know, the change that's happening in the world at the moment has got to have a knock-on effect, no matter what business, whether it be private or public sector. You spoke when you first came in about the fact that you worked with Falkirk City Council, and I would just like to ask if you could give us an idea of some of the key changes that they may have made within their organisation that might be something that Dumfries and Galloway Council could look at too.
I'm assuming you're just talking about in a learning and development perspective.
Absolutely, and maybe even some of the key measures that they've maybe put, milestones measures that they might have put in place to see how they're doing with the adaptation of that type of learning. Okay.
We have very much embraced the whole flexible learning approach, which means moving towards a bit of an e-learning agenda, but not seeing e-learning as a panacea. And I think your previous speaker spoke a wee bit about that as well, I could hear. Very much moving away from a course-based approach. We still run a standard training course programme, but the in-house training deliverers very much work as consultants, internal consultants, which is hugely cost-effective compared to buying in external training consultants. And they work closely with managers who approach them with an issue, a challenge, a difficulty, whatever it might be, a team build opportunity, an opportunity to revisit how they're delivering things and what attitudes they need to develop, what team development they require to deliver the new challenges. So we've moved very much away from a training delivery perspective to a consultancy-based approach with a much more flexible learning to support that.
Do you mind if I come back on that? Is that okay?
I think that's maybe a question better directed to your two colleagues who are waiting, but seriously, come on. On you go, supplementary.
Well, it was really just, I mean, to me you're describing corporate governance and within the organisation, and I wanted to ask about how you see members within an organisation fitting into that as well, because if that was a private sector, it would be board and organisation, and from the public sector point of view, it should be members and the organisation, and I just wondered how you felt members' cultures and behaviours fitted into that.
Elected members as the leaders of our council, we would be looking to them to be the exemplars. We have introduced the CPD framework for elected members. Are you familiar with that programme?
Yes.
And we haven't had a huge take-up to date, but what I think is significant about that, and I still work, and I'm at the moment going through one-to-one interviews with individual members to try to encourage them to participate in the process. Some of them are willing to participate on a self-assessment, some of them are willing to participate on a 360-degree feedback basis. But even if they're not willing to go ahead and formally complete the paperwork, I encourage them to read the behaviours of an effective elected member, the 74 or 73 behaviours, because once you've got that awareness, you can't become unaware of it. So that in itself, I think, drives forward an improvement in behaviours.
Thank you. I find that particularly interesting.
As indeed did we all. Ivor and then Deb.
Morning, Anne-Marie. One of the things that I picked out of that last question was the sort of succession planning and how you grow your own. I don't know if it's a backhanded compliment, this that I've used in the past. I would like to think that all of the officers in our council would have the opportunity to leave because we have the best officers in place because we've trained them accordingly. Have you any examples where you can come and say the succession planning in a council, whether it's at Falkirk or through your national sort of role, can demonstrate that they have got it right, whereby they have officers that A, can be headhunted if required, but B, shows that we actually have the best trained staff and therefore it allows them to go on, or if someone retires, they just slot into the job?
Yeah, we are an internally accredited council for ILM, Institute of Leadership Management. I think you do ILM here in some way. And we run programmes from team leader level through to a diploma in leadership and management, which means, and we link that closely with our workforce planning and succession planning. What we have done is, it's a wee while since we've done it now, but we have done some basic measures and looked at people who have been promoted and compared that with how many of these have been through an ILM programme. And I can't remember numbers offhand, but there was a significant number of them. So we see our ILM programme as our succession planning. I can't comment on how that applies to people being headhunted and moving to other organisations, but what I do know is that we do tend to hold on to them because there's very few of these people leave.
Want to come back? No? Deb?
Yeah, I just wanted to return to what you actually said about attitudes, and the characteristics that are associated with that. I think you've rightly pointed out that people, achieve promotion either through technical expertise or experience. And you're saying that, given now that nowadays people are expected to manage a much wider portfolio of businesses than was the past, and that's particularly so now in times where we've got very, very straitened finances. I just wonder though, how do you actually measure that? If somebody's going for a job, how do you actually measure that part about what their attitude might be?
It's something, as part of my role, I also have responsibility for the Customer First team, which is the contact centre and the one-stop shop staff. And we are about to pilot the recruitment, as part of a recruitment process, using a character-based approach. So we're using some psychometrics to help to identify, what we're doing is identifying the character traits and attitudes required of the role, and we're going to then interview against that, as opposed to typically interviewing against people who have got experience in a customer-facing role, they're familiar with computers, etc. So we're about to pilot that. It's built on some learning we got from the Sunderland experience. I don't know if you've heard about what they did in Sunderland, that rather than making X number of employees redundant at a huge cost, they have introduced a character-based approach to all jobs. So they're assessing each of the roles. They then allow individuals who are displaced to go through an assessment to identify what their character strengths are. And then there's a matching process so that you're not trying to put square pegs into round holes. So you're trying to identify the attitudes and character traits that are required of the job. So there's a process to identify that, and you need some psychometrics, fairly sophisticated psychometrics, but there's various ways of doing it, and applying the same principle to individuals and doing the matching from there.
Andy?
Just to follow on from that, I'm trying to work this anyway so I don't get shot down in flames. There's kind of fear culture when it comes to appointment. You know, we appoint people because we meet certain criteria and everything else. And I was particularly interested in your psychometric stuff. I mean, Mayo, Maslow, Freud, et al., the whole shoot them. They would have a field day if we did it on this room alone. So how do we ensure then we change the culture that we actually get the best person who's going to give the customer the best service, right? Not meet the needs or the fear factor that makes sure that we appoint the people that say they should get appointed because they've got the best qualification, for example, rather than the best person actually for the job. And I appreciate it's a never-ending question, that one, but be interested in your view on it.
No, I completely understand that one, because one of my issues that I've been, grappling with in Falkirk is that this is not currently, this approach that I am going to pilot is not currently aligned with our recruitment policy. The recruitment policy says you identify the knowledge and skills that you're looking for and the experience that the person's got. So through piloting this and demonstrating it, I am going to be encouraging and forcing, if you like, a change to the recruitment policy, because the things can't be done in isolation. You can't recruit against that and the person is condemned when they come in because they don't have 10 years experience of that subject area. So it has to be part of a wider programme and a part of a wider strategy, if you like, to recruiting the people, training and developing them, and making sure that what you're asking of them, rewriting the job descriptions so that the job description doesn't say tasky type things. It's about how they're managing their people and how they're applying their creativity and how they're responding to the needs and the feedback that they're getting from customers and translating that into actions.
Mark of an innovative and forward-looking authority. Right, Marion?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not quite sure whether this has got a lot to do with it, but from my own personal experiences, my biggest issue seems to be that when you're taking things forward with something that you don't tend to agree with, they tend to make it feel it's a personal thing you're going at the staff about, but it's not. But they tend, and also like the director side of things, they protect their staff, but that concerns me a bit because they put a lot onto their staff, and they always assume that it's correct in what they're saying, but that worries me because they're too busy protecting the staff, and that worries me, the neglect somewhere else in a customer's. Does that make sense to you? I'm not very good at explaining it, but
I'm not sure if I know what you're asking, but I think there is an issue there around managers, directors, heads of service, whatever level we're talking about. There is a conflict between protecting people, because you have a responsibility to your staff, but it almost then begs the question, well, why is there a need to protect? Because there should not be a blame or a fear culture in place. So are you looking at the root cause then is, why is there a blame culture in place, and what is it about that needs to change? So that people can make mistakes, can take a risk and be creative and innovative, and okay, it doesn't work this time, but we tried and we will maybe get it the next time, as opposed to, no, we've tried that before, didn't work, so let's keep doing what we've always done. Is that kind of...
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite intrigued by the sort of attitudinal recruitment idea. But I can see that one of the challenges must be, like, in a sense, you could have sort of, for example, a sort of highly skilled neophobic type mindset, which might not be attitudinally relevant for a constantly changing need to adapt type organisation. But would there come a point where, I don't know what the sort of psychometric parameters would be for the right type of attitude for certain types of roles? Obviously that would be sort of worked out. But even that attitudinal recruitment process may come a point, say 20 years down the line, where you've recruited people with the right attitude, but maybe not the capacity to have the professional skills that endure, so that whenever the needs of the organisation to adapt change to something else, that core underpinning professional skill set maybe isn't as strong as it could be.
Yeah, and I don't think the two things are mutually exclusive. I mean, it's not that you say, well, you're going to come in as a social worker, but let's not have a social work qualification. I mean, clearly there still has to be some professional knowledge and expertise relevant to the role. But it's easier to give people knowledge and skills. So if in the future you identify that what is missing and where there is a gap is in people's knowledge and skills, and maybe to a degree experiences, it is far easier to give them that, to train them that, to develop that, than to address fundamental character traits and attitudes that are deeply entrenched and formed probably from the age of 7-year-old.
Next issue. Andy?
We work a devolved budget for training and everything else, and whereas that person, I think that's got its merit, but it also then leads to a disjointed approach in certain ways. Is that if you're really lucky and you're in a department where they view training as the be-all and end-all, you get more opportunities than somebody who's in the department who trains when they have to. And it's about the cultural thing again. So how do we get that? It was the eighth question about this equality thing. How do we spread that, get that cultural change in the big organisation to say, no, you all do it? So would your professional organisation, no fault at this, do they advocate devolved budgets for training or a centralised budget, or do they recommend a sort of cocktail of both or whatever?
I don't believe there's one fixed answer to that, because I think it's what's ever appropriate to the organisation. Within Falkirk, we have devolved budgets. I have a small training budget that I manage myself for the organisation, but in the main, budgets are devolved to line managers, and the budgets are devolved with a figure, with a line specifically for learning and development. So you could argue that that's one way of doing it, is by allocating the budget when you devolve it with a figure, an amount for learning and development. We also have within our policy, we have a fairly detailed learning and development policy, and we make we differentiate between, I can't remember the terminology but one of the definition is about job-related or training that is required to do your current role. And therefore, regardless of the cost, if it's training and development that you need to do your current role, the line manager is obliged to provide it and make it happen, and that has got to take priority. But then there's a further definition around developmental learning and developmental qualifications, and the parameters around that are much looser and devolve to the line manager to identify what the priorities for their teams are and spend the budget wisely on that. Now that has varying degrees of success. You will have some line managers at the lower end of the spectrum who will just give the money to the people who come forward first with the first request. Whereas what you're looking for is for managers to say, I have this pot of money that I can be really creative with, approaching their staff and saying, what would be beneficial to you? How could you use this? What could we do that would give individual benefits, and what would give the organisation a business benefit back as well? We also support developmental qualifications, but again, that could actually, if you're doing something of any length of time, that can take up quite a big bit of the budget. So it's about making sure that there is a business case, and there's a pro forma they complete for the individuals to complete the business case to say, this is what I want to do. here's what it will do, how it will develop in me, and then we encourage them to think through how that individual development will then deliver better results for the council and for the council's customers.
That's yourself, and then Stephen.
Yeah, what I was actually going to ask you, it's come out of my mind now, that we were talking about everything, so where do we get, do you have some sort of way that you can measure, do you have a public statement that all staff have the right to be trained and no one's job is more equal than anyone else's when we're in the animal farm here, aren't we? So, but you get my drift. And, you know, is that a very public statement? And I'm not sure if we've actually got that public statement. I can't think of it. Maybe Paul's in the back there sitting nodding, maybe can help us. You know, have we made that public statement?
Well, we have very clearly in our learning and development policy, it is very explicit, and I'm sure it's referred to in the workforce strategy and presumably some other documents that I can't quite recall. I'm not sure about yourselves, but I think when we reviewed our learning and development policy, I think it was 3 years ago, that's when we introduced the differential between the job-related training and the developmental training, which has certainly helped line managers with their prioritising.
Okay. Stephen?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you in advance for indulging me this question, but it's very much in the periphery of what's been talked about and it's touched on already, but I get intrigued by this attitudinal development in the 7-year-old. By this time, you know, does this mean in the future there'll be children growing up thinking, well, you know, I don't think I'll ever be good enough to play for Man United because the scouts have been out, and at 7-year-old there's maybe that potential's been identified, or at 7 years old you're maybe, no, you're not going to really make an astronaut, and there'll be other children think, you know, no, I'll just never be able to make it into the local authority because I don't have the right attitudinal profile.
I mean, I'm referring to some well-published theory around the fact that attitudes are fairly developed by the age of 7, but I would imagine that they can still continue to be developed.
Thank you.
As a Liverpool supporter, I really do wish you hadn't mentioned Manchester United, but never mind. Jill?
I think psychometric testing shows different traits depending on when and what age you're tested and in what environment and what organisation you happen to be in at that point in time. So I wouldn't get too hung up on the 7-year-old part of it, but yeah, I know there are theories out there, but I do think that depending on what you're actually being tested for and what job-related organisation you're in at that particular time makes a difference with the test results, actually.
Are we not in danger somewhat, colleagues, of deviating from the script? Can we get back on stream, please?
Again, and some of the sort of questions that have been asked and the answers that you've provided, you've talked about, you know, training and how it relates to business needs. Now, I'm interested in areas like, for example, succession planning. So how do you actually match these things up? You know, because clearly if you give somebody training in an area, how do you ensure in your particular organisation that that actually then translates into giving them some practice in what they've actually been trained in?
A good example of that is our ILM programme, and we take people onto the various levels of the programme at certificate level and at diploma level. We will take people who are in the current roles that equate to, but we will also take people who are aspiring to the role. And we work with the line manager when they first come on the programme, which tends to be a year or an 18-month programme. The line manager comes along with them and agrees a sort of contract as to how they will work with and support the individual and agree what they're expected to achieve from it. All of the ILM programmes require the individuals to complete work-based assignments throughout the programme, and at the end they do a full project that pulls together all of the learning. And these are excellent evaluation tools, if you like, because this demonstrates that the learning has been put into practice. They've undertaken a piece of work in their area of work and introduced some improvement as a result of it. Usually there is some sort of budget savings because of it, because that's a big driver these days. But other times it could be that there's not so much savings, but it's a service improvement. So that's the way that we ensure that, although they may not be in the role at the moment, they're aspiring to the role, and their line manager is supporting them and helping them to get opportunity in the area, if you like, of the project management or whatever it might be, to do the work-based assignment, but in turn is giving them experience.
Returning to that, you know, and perhaps summarising it, what you're saying is that if you give a training opportunity, you link it into some kind of work project that actually demonstrates a benefit and also demonstrates the individual's capacity to actually advance further. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's absolutely correct. It develops the individual, but there's a clear link to what it means for the organisation.
Okay, anyone any other points that they wish to raise? Or Anne-Marie, do you wish to, do you feel that you've covered basically everything that was set out in the questions, or do you wish to add anything more?
One thing that hasn't come, that I haven't mentioned so far, is coaching as a key skill. I mentioned earlier about moving away from the course-based approach to development, and we are very much promoting a coaching culture within the organisation. Now, in an ideal world, you would stand at the rooftops and say, we're now going to adopt a coaching culture, and everybody would go on a course for coaching skills, and everybody would start coaching everybody, and it's all works fine. But it just doesn't work like that. So what we've done is we've taken the opportunity to introduce it in a number of ways. We do offer, we've built in significant number of hours of coaching skills development into our leadership development programmes, into our ILM courses. We run the customer service professional qualification for staff at the front line. And we've made a link with the ILM coaching qualification for their line manager. So any line manager who has staff that's going to go through that programme, the line manager themselves has to go through the ILM coaching qualification so that they will be able to coach the individual. We offer, in our short course programme, coaching skills for managers, and we have executive coaching for our senior managers. All of the learning and development team have undertaken significant coaching skills training themselves. So it's about recognising that you can read the textbooks that talk about this is where you need to get to, so put in place your coaching skills and do it. I think, we've all worked in local authorities long enough to know that it doesn't work that way. You've got to find ways of making it fit with where you are just now, but growing it organically. And I think coaching is the single biggest differential that we'll make. If we develop further coaching capacity, that will deliver accelerated learning and also deliver savings in budget.
Okay, before I bring Andy in, can I remind you it's not rugby coaching we're talking about, please? Andy and then Joel.
Just saying that rugby coaching is a formal qualification actually, and it's recognised by SQA. Thanks very much. No, it was about coaching actually. I'm just asking how you, I understand the concept entirely, but how do you deal with the challenge of both, or first question, do you believe it should be internal coaching, which gives you more of the same, right, or external coaching, which then introduces significant challenges to your behaviour? So how do you equate the two and balance the two out, and how do you come to what you would consider the best outcome?
It's about horses for courses. We have a bank of trained coaches internally that are used appropriately. I have recently approached the NHS to see if we can opt into their bank of externally approved coaches. They have a number of executive coaches that they have quality assured and approved, so it saves us going through that process, and they've got a negotiated rate, and these would be coaches we would be tending to use for more senior managers. But through that process, There's also a reciprocal arrangement where my coaches that I have trained internally can be included in that bank, as can the internally trained coaches from other councils be included in other public bodies. And therefore, at a nil cost, or nil hard cost, if you like, a reciprocal process of coaching can take place. So if I have a manager coming forward to me saying they need some coaching for a specific issue, I may get a coach from the NHS at no hard cost, but the reciprocal arrangement will be that at some time in the future, one of our coaches will do some coaching for them. And I think you're right, what you do get is a different level of challenge, because they're more comfortable in doing that, and possibly an external perspective.
Can I just come back on that? Yeah, but the sort of follow on from that, the logical follow on is if we take social work, for example, if we bring in the social work director from your council to speak to our social work director, that's not really external, because they're more than likely came through the same training school at the same time and have the same ideology. So I'm actually the one that when I mean external, I'm talking about somebody totally out of the box, different from that you normally have. And I would kind of count other local authorities as sort of broadly internal in the big local authority society or family. I'm talking about way sent out of left field coming in and saying something totally different that's going to challenge them. So how do you deal with those?
There's a couple of things in there. What you spoke about there in terms of a director of social work speaking with another director of social work, I would probably be setting up that sort of scenario more in a mentoring perspective as opposed to coaching. The coaches I'm speaking about are not subject experts. They're likely to be learning and development professionals, and the bank of executive coaches, for example, work as executive coaches out in the private sector. They're not aligned to the NHS, and they're not aligned to local authorities, etc.
Joe and then Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Andy's asked part of my question, but I do understand the concept of coaching and mentoring. The only caveat I would put on that would be to do with attitude and behaviour. And obviously, that's something that would need to be addressed while you were moving forward with both coaching and mentoring.
I'm not sure if you mean the attitude and behaviours of the person that needs coached or the coaches themselves.
Possibly both, depending on what the subject was.
This arrangement that we're just moving into requires a matching process. So I've not been through it yet with my first coachee, if you like, but there's a pro forma being provided to give some basic information about the individual. It asks what style of coaching they think, it asks what their strengths are and what their development areas are, and what sort of traits they would like in their coach. And then when I approach the coaching bank, I have a conversation with the lead there, and the person at the coaching bank knows all of the coaches, and we're likely to come up with 3 options, the coaches, and put forward their CVs to the individual to let them select who they think would be most appropriate to work with them.
Sorry, very briefly, I was just going to say thank you. I think some of the information that you've come forward with this morning, or this afternoon now, has been very, very interesting.
Thank you for that. Stephen?
Thanks again, Chair. I suppose really it's just whether or not an individual member of staff's aspirations are in line with their strengths, for example. How does that individual staff member's aspirations fit in with the corporate need, if you like, in terms of delivering training?
I'm not sure what you mean.
I suppose one of the questions that you'll have seen just to do with the tension between what an organisation needs from to how it needs to configure its staff skills and resources to what the individual staff members' aspirations are.
That's this Sunderland approach that I've referred to in the past, where we're adopting some of the principles of that by going down the sort of character trait, tends to address that, because people, we already have people in our organisations who feel like they are square pegs and round holes for whatever reason they ended up in that role, and it doesn't do anything for them. They're wearing a mask every day because they're just not entirely fulfilled and entirely happy. The extension of this programme that we're talking about is that where people will be able to put themselves forward for some of the character assessment, if you call it, and it will involve some psychometrics. That's not the only measure, but it will involve some psychometrics, and they will need to agree that yes, this describes me, and then there's a process where you match that up to job roles. So someone at a separate area has looked through what are the key characteristic traits of a job. So hopefully, as that is rolled out and progressed further, and I know that there's one other local authority is a bit ahead of that in Scotland. It's East Lothian, Midlothian. I think it's Midlothian, East Lothian. So they will be able to give me some more information in the next few months because they're a step ahead of us with this. But I only see that as a good thing for individuals who, it doesn't necessarily mean they need to leave the local authority, but they will have a clearer idea of the sorts of roles that they're more fitted to. And there's been examples of employees who have been willing to reduce grades in other local authorities and take a pay cut because it means they're going to go into a job that's more fulfilling for them.
Thank you very much. I'll just be brief. I think more of the focus was, rather than in terms of recruitment or transition between posts, it's in terms of identifying training within the existing post, if you see what I mean. So the aspiration within the existing post perhaps to develop, maybe for future recruitment opportunities, but do you see where the emphasis is there rather than in...
Well, there's a line management responsibility to work with the individual, ensure that they've got all the learning and development and skills and knowledge that they require for their current role. And equally, every line manager has responsibility to develop the potential of their individuals. But that becomes more and more challenging, and the ways of doing that is more and more challenging with budget cuts. And particularly in times like this where we are reducing the size of our organisations all over the place, you could argue that the support and development that the individuals that are left behind is significantly more challenging and therefore requires significantly more investment in learning and development, budgets and time and resource.
Exactly so. Any other points, questions you want to put? Okay, can I ask Lorna, can we go through the same process as you did for the previous item, please?
I think obviously in going through this, we'll check with Anne-Marie to make sure that what we repeat and what we minute is exactly what is Anne-Marie intended as well. The main points that were picked up, I think, through the discussion, firstly were around the need to build in a culture and attitude within an organisation and individuals around learning and development and how that is embedded across all the grades, and a focus on how that attitude, behaviour and culture is assessed in terms of future workforce planning, in terms of recruitment, investment in current learning and development for individuals, and also future planning for succession. There's a number of areas there I think members will wish to pursue, and obviously Falkirk are piloting an approach around customer services at the moment, and you mentioned East or Midlothian were further ahead in that around aligning aspiration and opportunity for individuals around future development and opportunities within the needs of a changing organisation or a reducing workforce as well. Anne-Marie highlighted the need to link any investment in recruitment and indeed support for learning and development as well around our priorities as a council, that workforce strategy has to be aligned to those priorities, and it must be lived and breathed through the members as well in terms of their own learning and development, and also a consideration about whether you wish to grow your own staff for the future in that succession plan, buy in those staff and those skills, or indeed look at reskilling for a future workforce that may be quite different, and that's critical for longer term workforce planning. And that might be an area members wish to look at in more detail. Quite a lot of discussion around the behaviour and attitude, not just around recruitment, but existing skills and how that might feed in, and a reflection of how Falkirk Council itself has invested in an approach to a kind of all through leadership and management development that supports that, not just around functional expertise in terms of advancement, but particularly around aptitude for management and leadership resilience, ability to learn, to delegate, to manage, but also recognising the need to develop ability to manage a diverse range of services or teams, maybe out with your functional expertise and professional background, and that will be an increasing need going forward. In terms of succession planning, there was a discussion about the success of that programme in Falkirk and how it's supported progression within and out with the organisation for individual members of staff. And Anne-Marie reflected that progression internally is monitored by the council, and that might be something members want to look at in more detail in terms of the success of that and what it might tell us for our own training and development resources. There was a lot of discussion around measurement of attitude and character attitudes and behaviour, and the use of tools to do that, both in terms of recruitment but also in terms of fit for job and future workforce planning. And those might be concepts members wish to look at. One of your areas that you're particularly focused on, and Councillor Thompson mentioned it, was around succession planning. So that might be something you want to consider in terms of our current arrangements as well. And I think Anne-Marie focused on the particularly around customer focus, and members mentioned this as well, customer focused acceptance of risk in terms of learning and attitude in terms of delivery of services, and also support for learning and development as a continuous process. And Councillor McCutcheon's points about current attitude or behaviour and what we're looking for from staff in the future, as well as professional qualification. Falkirk Council, as we've heard, has a budget developed at service level, and that's differentiated from what we heard from the college in terms of their arrangements. And Falkirk Council have clarity around training needs for your current role in terms of investment, so those ongoing current needs in terms of your current activity, and also clarity about development investment on training and opportunities for individuals. That is still devolved into team and service level, and officers and managers are encouraged to create opportunities for creativity, but also recognising it must have a team and an organisational benefit, and being able to demonstrate that through a business case for that investment. The use of the training programmes, and particularly the ILM programme that we heard about, was critical in terms of seeing improvement, both in terms of service delivery and also reflecting on a retraction of funding and cash savings within the council as well, and that learning being put into practice, or the demonstration of the benefit of that investment in management and leadership development manifesting itself through those projects and the delivery of them on the ground was a key part of that programme. And also accreditation through that ILM accreditation that you have, and that's part of the toolkit that Falkirk Council are using as part of their all-through training and demonstration of benefits in that investment. And finally, we heard about the development of coaching as a key skill, and embedding this throughout the organisation at all levels, avoiding it as a kind of a training course on coaching, but actually using it as a kind of approach to support individuals in their development. And we've heard that Anne-Marie's opinion that would have the single biggest differential impact on our learning and development around the use of coaching and how we deploy that within the organisation. And I think on that basis that might be something members would wish to find out much more about. And we heard particular detail around how that applies in Falkirk, how it's used in terms of external coaching, but also partnership with a number of other organisations, so that we avoid that reaffirmation, I suppose, of one organisation or its culture and behaviour, but we've extended that into other places, and that there's real challenge, and that's managed through a proper matching process to make sure that the benefits that are intended through the coaching are put in at the start of that matching process. I hope I've summarised as best I can.
I'm very impressed. You were clearly listening carefully.
I think that's a more than fair summation, to be fair. Well done. Can we move on then to section 2 of the recommendations? Firstly, we were asked to receive the presentation from Anne-Marie. We have done so. I really would express the committee's thanks to you for taking the time, making the effort to come here. It's been well received, well appreciated. Please be assured of that. And secondly, as we've heard from Lama, there's a whole raft of issues there that we would wish to take forward in developing our evidence to the Council on the back of this issue. So thanks very much indeed for assisting us in doing so. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Right, colleagues, next item on the agenda, item number 6, training and development actions and next steps. Donna Nance is presenting this report. Thanks, Donna.
Thank you for that. The appendix to this report's probably the area you want to look at. It gives a summary of the tasks agreed by the committee, either at committee or during the workshop over the last few months, and where our progress has been made. I think just a couple of things to mention to you is there are two areas still outstanding, I think, in terms of discussions with social work and education training units and the visit to Edinburgh City Council that you previously identified. We are working on those. The challenges, our own calendar, along with those of both the social work unit and Edinburgh City Council. So we've got a couple of provisionals we're just waiting to tie off for that to happen, but that's the only, I think, delay at the moment with you. We had hoped to bring you those dates today.
Thanks very much, Donna. Anyone any comments to make on the back of the report? No? Can we move then to the section of the recommendations, which is to note the progress and the actions taken for the scrutiny review, and to review and to agree the next steps as detailed in the annexed appendix. It would be remiss of me, as far as I'm concerned, not to make reference in the passing to the amount of time, work and effort that you and your colleagues are putting into these reviews, and it's much appreciated indeed. So on that basis then, can we agree the next steps as set out in the appendix? Okay. Thanks very much, Donna. Item number 7, colleagues, is the performance reports for 2012-13 SPIs. Now, can I say at the start that we've agreed, we've all agreed, it's been a democratic decision, that we won't fall into the same trap as we did last year, whereby we endeavoured, in fact, to cover the whole gamut of all the performance indicators, and we finished up almost exhausting ourselves in the process, and I rather suspect not giving various of these the scrutiny that they warranted and deserved. So on that basis, we're being much more focused this year, and I was hoping, in fact, that Liz would be here. She was here a minute ago. She gone? She's disappeared. Basically, just to take us through and highlight the areas where we are, in fact, going to be concentrating. And these are essentially the SPIs for the SPI for homelessness, which involves 5 KPIs: sport and leisure management, museum services and use of libraries. Again, that's the SPIs there, which involve 5 individual KPIs. And carriageway condition, the SPI again involves 5 individual KPIs to scrutinise. So with your agreement, what we propose to do is focus on these. The relevant officials are, you're back. Right then, would you want to take over now and introduce and highlight just exactly how we're going to focus on this, please?
I think, as the report says, many of these SPIs have actually been submitted to you in your service committees as part of the business plan report. And so the what we were trying to get today is perhaps coming at it at a different angle, if you like, for you to identify perhaps any common areas in the indicators that have improved and identify any challenges or barriers to the ones that have decreased. So we have, as the Chair has said, we've got the relevant officers to come and speak to you about the homelessness indicators, about the museum services, leisure and sport, and libraries. Thank you, Donna. The use of libraries, and also the carriageway condition. So perhaps if you'd like to sort of take evidence from the officers relevant to these indicators, and then perhaps at the end we can look at any common themes that have arisen from your discussions with them.
Is that acceptable, colleagues?
Okay.
And proceed on that basis?
Okay.
Thank you.
So the first one then, we want to look at the homelessness indicators.
Yes,
just take them in that particular order. Thank you. We've got 3.
Where the other?
And 2, I think.
Good morning. And welcome to you both. My apologies, good afternoon now. You've been waiting no doubt for some time. Avril DeLuca and Sean McGladen.
Correct.
Welcome to the Scrutiny Committee. We're here to...
Chair, I'm really sorry to ask you this, but could I ask you to swap pens with Ian? Because it's driving me nuts.
Follow that, as the saying goes. That sets up nicely for a real stimulating examination. Welcome, as I say, to the Scrutiny Committee. You'll be aware that we're wanting to focus on the SPIs in relation to homelessness, which involves essentially 5 key performance indicators. And what we're looking for is how, for instance, improvement in performance has been achieved where the previous year's performance has been declining, with a particular focus on identifying any common measures or good practice that could be translated into other services, and why, where performance has decreased when the previous year it increased, with a particular focus on identifying any common barriers or problems that have been encountered so that they could be prevented or addressed in these or other services in the future. That's basically the background. So can we perhaps proceed then as accords?
What do I do?
No, just speak into
Okay, sorry. Well, obviously the 2 areas you're looking at are the decision-making time, which we have at 28 days in which to make homeless decisions from application, and that has improved. I suspect it's improved. I'm very operational, so these are what I see day to day and what's happening with staff. They've improved because the numbers of people presenting as homeless are slightly down. Also, you may be aware that the legislation changed in December 2012, where anybody who was homeless or assessed as threatened with homelessness, we would have a duty towards them. We didn't have to investigate their priority. Prior to that, we had 4 hurdles, which we called it, of investigation, which was, are you homeless? Are you in priority need? Are you unintentionally homeless? And do you have a local connection? So from the officers who are investigating's point of view, now when they take a homeless application, the big piece of work is the front end, are you homeless? And that's usually quite easy to establish. The priority was always much more difficult because there were grey areas, it could be interpreted differently and it could be appealed easier. So we don't have the priority, so if you're homeless or threatened with homeless, that's quite easy. So the decision-making time is quicker. We're not writing to doctors or other professionals generally to look for priority.
if we're investigating homelessness, we tend to be talking to other housing providers, which is quick and easy so that's speeded up the process.
Do you wish to add anything to that, Sean? No. Leader?
Chair, it was on the back of the fact that you said that homelessness numbers are down.
Slightly, yeah.
Now, is that to do with the fact that we've put in different processes, which means people aren't presenting as often? In the past, maybe something's happened whereby they have maybe been into temporary accommodation more often than into permanent, or is it just a fact of there are fewer people presenting altogether? It's just a case of the numbers seem to be slightly down.
I don't know the honest answer to that, because there's quite a lot of work and analytical work to look at why this is happening, I think, across Scotland. I mean, a lot of authorities are saying it's because of the work they're doing on prevention in the front end. There's a lot of authorities saying housing options are cutting down on numbers, but I mean, the regulator recently did a thematic inquiry, well, it's been doing it with 5 local authorities on housing options, and it would appear from some of the feedback that the numbers may be down, but these people should still have been making homeless applications. So there's lots of things happening. Also, the clients out there, the service users themselves, don't perceive homelessness to be often the quickest or the best route to get rehousing. There's almost like a cultural change happening. But I think for ourselves, I wouldn't say housing options had a huge impact for us, but I would say we do an awful lot more preventative work, particularly with those that are threatened with eviction for rent arrears. We try to get much more involved, so that's maybe had an impact for us.
Ted?
You talked at the beginning there about, the different sort of levels of homelessness, and, what we're talking about here is, a measure that's improved. You talked about people being deliberately making themselves homeless. Could you actually go through these categories again? Because I couldn't actually quite pick up what it was you were saying at the time.
We only now have a duty to investigate: are you homeless or threatened with homelessness? Are you unintentionally homeless? And we have a power to investigate local connection. So we can decide either way with local connection. But the first 2, we have a duty to investigate those and establish if we have a duty to rehouse people. If people are intentionally homeless, there's like 3 criteria. Have you deliberately done something to cause your homelessness, or deliberately not done something, i.e. deliberately not paid your rent? Were you aware of the consequences of doing or not doing those things could impact on you becoming homeless? And were you fit and able to understand the consequences of your actions? So you may say, for instance, an example would be somebody who has got mental health problems. You could sit with them and they could say, well, I just don't want to pay my rent. I don't see why I have to pay my rent. And you might think, well, you're intentionally homeless. You haven't paid your rent. But has their mental health had an impact on that? Did they really understand the consequences of these actions? So the intentional decision is actually the most difficult one to make. And if people are drug users or alcoholics, it's very difficult to make that decision.
Any other questions? Well, can I raise the issue? We're talking about sort of common themes, etc. And it's mentioned that under the section of improvement actions, we're talking about adopting a more proactive approach with partners, e.g. prisons, etc., to support early referral, which avoids duplication and reassessment as a homeless person. This is part of an overall housing options approach. Now, I remember some time ago being in this chamber when we had a first-rate presentation from North Ayrshire Council about the much more proactive approach that they adopted, compared, for instance, to Dumfries and Galloway at that time, and endeavouring, in fact, to ensure that people simply didn't present as homeless at all. Mm-hmm. And it was indicated that we would endeavour, to work this through and build it into an improvement action plan. Can you tell us, first of all, or can you reassure us that that has been done? Secondly, the extent to which it has been done, and thirdly, how effective that is proving to be as a consequence, please.
Yeah, we have since, well, probably for a year, been adopting a sort of a housing options approach on the front end. So if anybody who's approaching our service with a housing issue or, you know, a crisis situation, whatever, we've been looking at adopting a housing options approach, and before we even take a homeless application, going through the whole housing options process, look at what options are available to them, you know, making sure they're on waiting lists, making sure they've applied for not just a house with a garden because they're few and far between, or not just a particular area. So trying to widen their choices. So we've doing that with every client that we see. Now, obviously, if somebody is threatened with homelessness, and threatened with homelessness, the statutory definition is within 56 days. So if they are threatened with homelessness, they have a legal right to make a homeless application, and we should be taking a homeless application as well from them. So we have been doing that part of the work. It needs further developed. As I say, we've just had a thematic inquiry on housing options with the regulator, and a report will be published in December, I think. They've also, interestingly, been in at North Ayrshire and had, you know, completed a thematic inquiry with them. But some of the feedback we are getting is that in some cases, housing option can be perceived to be gatekeeping, because even though sometimes we're resolving people's housing issues and getting them housed through other routes, whether it be a private let or on a waiting list, we're denying them their statutory rights by not taking a homeless application. Therefore, they don't have the rights of appeal when they get offered housing, and, you know, all these, we're not doing a proper assessment, a medical assessment. Is it sustainable long term? So it'll be interesting to see what that report says. But North Ayrshire's had the same feedback that we've had.
Very interesting indeed. Andy?
Thanks for that. I've already been able to work with the prisons on that. Just for process, so I understand it fully. If somebody's inside and they're coming out, when do we start dealing with their potential homelessness? Is it when they're still inside, or is it at the date of release?
Mainly whilst they're still in the prison. If it's a local prison, it's easier. If they're out with the area, it's a bit more difficult. But if they're in prison locally, then we will go in, a homeless officer. We have a prison liaison homeless officer, one in the east and one in the west, and they will go to the prison and start that whole process off, and hopefully get some supports in place ready for discharge, and identify what temporary accommodation, you know, would be required.
Thanks very much.
One further question I would put to you, and that's, you know, the issue again, you know, of resource implications. This will be achieved within current resources. Bear in mind the resource constraints within which this council in particular and local authorities in general are having to operate at the moment. We're quite confident, in fact, that this objective will be achieved.
I don't think I'm in a position to answer that.
Sean?
We're making every effort to achieve that in the minute we think we can, but obviously all our services are under scrutiny at the minute, so we're working quite hard in that area.
Andy?
Based on the officer's assessment that they're going to try their best, and one officer's done a position to, you know, given that we've got two officers who are saying it's either not achievable or they're not able to answer that question, the question really is the KPI then achievable in the first instance? And I think we need to review that.
Get it, in other words, as you say, get it reviewed.
Absolutely, because there's no point in having KPIs that are not reachable.
Exactly so. That's obviously, as far as I'm concerned, the balance has got to be struck. You know, there's no point in having them not achievable, and no point in having them couched in such fashion that they're not challengeable either. Thank you. Anyone else? Any questions to put? Okay. Well, thanks both to you for your attendance and answering the questions that were put to you. You're welcome. Sorry? Sorry? Right, okay. Stephen Harriot's the next official to appear before us. Can we ask for them to be brought in, please? Thanks, Stephen, and welcome. Good afternoon to you. Welcome to the committee. We've asked you to come here to speak to various KPIs. There are five individual KPIs to assist the committee in scrutinising these. They relate to the SPDS, Statutory Performance Indicator, and carriageway condition. The report has been circulated, obviously, and members have had the opportunity to look and to peruse at the terms of the rubric. Any questions to be put to Stephen, or you wish to put to Stephen Collings? Paula, you wish to make a comment?
Chair, I'm looking at the SPIs in comparison to the targets, and last year there's been an improvement. I think that was why members picked this area to look at. There's been an improvement from the values last year in terms of the percentage of carriageway or roads that were considered for maintenance treatment, and some are on target and slightly below target in terms of our own internal measures, but clearly there's been an improvement there against the previous year's assessment. So I suppose that was the area of focus that members wished to inquire around with Stephen and how that's been achieved.
Thank you, that's helpful. Would you like to enlighten us on that particular point then, Stephen, as to how you feel in fact that enhancement of performance has been achieved?
Yeah, glad to do that, Chair. I think just looking at the figures in the report itself in Appendix 1, we've obviously got this 12-13, the current set of figures, and we're comparing them to the 11-12 figures, and we're showing that the targets that have been set for that year have been met for each of the road classifications, the ABCs, and the unclassified roads, and the network as a whole, making the fifth SPI. And the SPIs are all very similar in terms of the way that they're measured. We're just reporting them differently for each element of the network. The classified roads, the A, Bs and Cs, were showing an improvement from 11-12 to 12-13, looking at it and just in that snapshot, that kind of brief period of time. And we're showing a worsening in conditioning for the unclassified roads in that kind of 1 year comparison. What tends to happen is that 42% of a road network is the unclassified road network, so a slight change there then affects the overall network figure, and that's shown as a decrease or a deterioration. An increase in the figure is an increase in the length of that portion of the network that's required for maintenance treatment. So it's showing a deterioration. What I tend to do in terms of setting the targets each year, and again, as these are fed into the commissions, and they are the targets that are agreed as we refresh the strategic commissions within Planning, Housing, Environment Services Committee. What I do is I look at a longer term and try to look at a trend. And effectively, I go back to about 2008-9 data for each of the 5 SPIs, and I look at the trend and try to see where that's taking us in setting the targets for the year ahead. So the targets are actually, they move each year under this process, and to a certain extent what I'm doing is I'm modelling if there's deterioration in a category over that period of time, the targets, assuming that deterioration will continue because we have similar kinds of level of investment. What it does for the A-class roads over that, since about 2008-9, right the way up to the 12-13 data, so there's kind of 5 data sets there over 4 kind of intervening periods, we're looking at about a 0.2% improvement per annum on the A-class roads. So there is a bit of a trend for improvement on the A-class roads. On the B-class roads, I'm looking at over that period of time about a 0.8% rate of deterioration per annum on the B-class roads. For the C and the U-class roads, that tends to be about 1.6% over that period of time, looking at the longer period of time for the rate of deterioration per annum. And overall for the whole network, that takes us to about 1.2% per annum rate of deterioration over that larger timescale. What the figures do show more recently is a bit of an improvement. And although over that timescale there is a trend for deterioration, in a number of the categories there is a more recent trend for improvement in the figures. And I'm hoping that we would see that continue in future years' data. Now, part of the reason for that would be, I think, that back in 2008-9, we introduced additional funding of about £2 million per annum for the strategic roads network. So that's about 22% of the network. 9-10 we introduced that extra £2 million per annum, and that's about 22% of the network that we decided had to have priority for investment. We couldn't fund the significant backlog for the whole of the network, but there was an element of the network that we would look at additional investment in and that we would fund to see a difference and an improvement there. And I think that's starting to come through. And that strategic network really is about, it's 22% of our whole network, but it's effectively all of our A-class roads and about half of our B-class roads. And in the recent years, we're seeing a bit of an improvement in the performance in the A and the B-class roads. Recently, and again, we're seeing that, as the figures show, that kind of continuing deterioration in the U-class roads and the effect that has on the whole network figure. But what we have done recently, and it may slow that kind of rate of deterioration, is there's been an extra £1 million invested this year and last year in residential roads and rural lifeline links, and that will pick up more of the U-class network with that additional level of investment. So since about 9-10, there has been a higher level of investment in the carriageway network as a whole. I'm looking at figures. It's not always easy to compare year by year, but effectively I run a total of figures for all the different funding streams, particularly in the capital side, that contribute to, that effectively manifest itself in strengthening and surfacing of the road network, that impact on this road condition indicator. And we're looking at the most recent year, 13-14, we're looking at £6.3 million as a level of investment on kind of strengthening, maintaining the carriageway surface condition. And that has been roughly the figure over the past 3-4 years that we've started to see a bit of an improvement, particularly at the top end of the network, the higher category roads. So happy to take any questions on that, Chair.
That's very helpful, Stephen. Thank you. Joel?
Thank you, Chair. If I've picked up correctly, the increased investment in the budget that you've been given over the last few years has assisted to actually make improvements in the A and B class roads. However, going forward, you would hope that the additional funding that you got for the rural lifeline roads would maybe increase the U class and C class roads. Is that what you're saying? So the increase in the budget has assisted to make the maintenance, make the roads better on A and B class roads, and you hope to see the same thing happening with the C and U class roads with the additional funding that you were given this year. Is that correct?
If I can maybe just clarify what I said then. Effectively what we've done was invested an extra, over that kind of recent financial years, 3 or 4 financial years, we've invested the extra £2 million in the strategic roads network. And that's gone to mostly the A-class roads and half of the B-class roads. Now that only comes to about 22% of the network. So that extra 2 million has gone to 22% of the extra. The extra has gone to the 22% of the network that is strategic. What we're seeing is it's probably a more modest increase in the budgets that are getting targeted at the U-class roads, the residential roads and the rural lifeline links, except that they make up under the U-class roads, that's 42% of the network. And for the larger roads, maybe in urban areas, we're looking at 28% on the C-class roads. So we're looking at still about 70% of the network is only getting this additional investment. And it's that 70% of the network that we're seeing in the C and the U's that are still kind of struggling in terms of performance against this PI, against the targets that I'm tracking against the previous indicators. So there's quite a chunk of money has gone into a small part of the network and we're seeing a difference, and there's a lesser amount of money going into a larger part of the network so that we won't see an equivalent level of improvement. But we're going some way towards addressing some of the concerns that have come back from members through Planning, House and Environment Services Committee that we weren't. There were a number of roads that we're just not getting round to treating with an adequate level of resource. And that's why this additional investment has come forward for the residential roads and the rural lifeline links.
So you're hoping that the additional funding that's come forward will assist in bringing up the whole level across, because obviously it all adds in. If it's 70%, that's not as good as the 22%. Am I picking up correctly?
I think what we'll see, and time will tell in terms of the future data sets, the impact will be less, but I think what we'll see is it will slow down the rate of deterioration. It won't deal with the maintenance backlog. We had done calculations back a number of years ago and reported to Planning, House and Environment Service Committee, and we effectively, maybe about 3-4 years ago, reckoned that the standstill investment position was about £10 million per annum, and that would look at arresting the rate of deterioration over the whole of the network. It's not a figure we've recalculated recently, but it's one that we think is probably about kind of ballpark, and that figure is kind of considered when we're looking at the Council's capital investment strategy against what is affordable and what is available on the maintenance for surfacing schemes. So that kind of there is a bit of a difference between the kind of 6 million that we invest and that kind of previous calculation that we did for the steady state position investment of about 10 million. So that part of the network is probably still the C and the U class roads that we are under investing in, although we have put in some additional funding. And it won't be enough. It probably won't be enough to see a turnaround, or a significant turnaround as we have seen in the A and B, the strategic part of the network.
Okay. Marion, then Ivor.
Thank you, Chair. Over the last couple of years, I think we can all agree that the roads has had a bit to be desired with potholes and that, but this is just really for my clarification. When you're doing a new build house, you come with a guarantee. Is there no such a thing when roads are being done, and because it comes back to the council to fix these potholes in a very short time after these places are, like the Newton Stewart bypass bit. It's terrible going for this area back to Stranraer with potholes and uneven roads. Should there not come a guarantee with these roads like they do with a new build house?
What we tend to do, and I don't know if you mean the Newton Stewart bypass A75, that's obviously a trunk road, but there are many examples of what you see on the local road network where there is a level of deterioration and there are repairs undertaken. To some extent, this kind of indicator is probably more, it's a step back from that kind of detail. It's a network-wide indicator in terms of road condition, and it lets us look at kind of values of the network and values of backlog and values of rates of deterioration as a whole. Very much the kind of £6 million per annum, £6 million per annum investment that I'm talking about on the capital side deals with kind of large chunks of the network in terms of improvements. The other part of the budget here that we're not really discussing is the revenue budget that sits within my commission with DG First for the routine maintenance and the carriageways repairs and the contract patching, and that's very much an element of work that's taken forward at the discretion of DG First in terms of safety inspections, prioritisation of defects and picking up. Again, that will have an impact on the PI, the performance indicator, particularly if you have areas where the carriageway is quite rough or there are a lot of potholes. That will be picked up by the machine surveys that give us this indicator as defective areas that require intervention. In terms of the guarantee, I mean, a lot of the work is done for us by DG First. We know, and it's certainly been discussed recently on a number of occasions at Planning, House and Environment Service Committee. We've talked about the kind of performance coming out of DG First in terms of the additional investment they've had to move to resourcing for first-time permanent repairs on carriageway defects. We're hoping to see that kind of turned around in terms of their performance figures in getting into repairs quickly within the timescales that we require of them through the Commission, but also in a turnaround, the kind of improvement in the quality of these reinstatements. So there has been a number of initiatives within DG First, just to make sure that their operatives are aware of what the most optimum kind of intervention is for carriageway repairs and how they are resourcing up to make that a first-time permanent repair, and therefore, add to the quality of that repair. Having said that, a number of our roads that we do target for repairs, we're probably, if we had a bit more funding, we might be looking at small, rather than a number of pothole repairs or small patching repairs. We might be looking at kind of larger patching repairs because we have elements of road that are starting to fail and that we're maybe too quick to go back in with a reactive repair, where we should maybe let it go for a bit longer and actually look at a kind of contract patching a larger part of the carriageway that's repaired. And it's certainly something I'm discussing with DG First in terms of commissions and funding in future years, that a part of their budget or a part of our capital budget maybe needs to be identified for not just these kind of long schemes that are impacting out of that 6 million on the PI, the performance indicator, but that some of that money is used for kind of much shorter sections where we can go in and do more substantial carriageway repairs and take the pressure off the kind of reactive carriageway patching budgets.
Please, thank you. Probably it's maybe the way I'm trying to explain this, but the new Dunraggett bypass that's been built down my side, I believe it's like RJ McLeod or Bar or something that's thinking about it. But once it's actually completed and there's any defects up thereafter, what I was meaning was, should they not give an insurance that for the first 5 years of any defects on that they should come back for repair, just like they probably would do it with a new build in a house? It's a 10-year guarantee. I probably didn't explain it the first time, sorry.
I think the likes of the Dumraggett bypass, which is a trunk road scheme for Transport Scotland by the contractor that you've mentioned there, is effectively been designed from the ground up, from the foundations up. So you're talking about construction under it's an ideal approach to construction, and it's a complete new build scheme. And certainly the contract will take into account the fact that there's been geotechnical investigation, they've looked at the bearing pressure of the soils, the earthworks have been put in place. Absolutely, the drainage has been put in place pre-earthworks. The carriageway is formed up through the various layers, and it's been built to a design for the whole road, for the traffic volumes there. And certainly the contract would allow for a period of maintenance if there are defects that occur for whatever reason, poor workmanship or material quality issues, that the contractor would be responsible to come back in and effect repairs and remedial works. What we tend to do with our own surfacing schemes, and a lot of our surfacing is either done in-house through DG First or with contractors that we have, it's less of it's more about overlaying or inlaying an existing road. So what we tend to live with is existing foundations. It's been a number of years, unless a road fails, as the A708 did above Moffat to Scottish borders, at the turn of the year, that we actually go in and reconstruct a road completely from the foundations up and go through all the appropriate kind of construction layers. What we tend to do is we will surface and lay material on top of existing after correcting kind of localised defects, or we will plane out, more so in urban areas, we'll plane out a layer of surfacing and go back in and put an equivalent thickness back in that gives us a kind of higher strength and a longer life. So it's a different approach. It's more what you're talking about is design roads for the trunk roads as against what we kind of call evolved roads in the local road network. And a lot of our C&U class roads would have started out as tracks, and they would have been stone run down into the soil and run down and built up over time. And then at some point somebody will put a thin layer of surfacing on it and it'll become a macadam road. And effectively our approach to treatment over the years in terms of maintenance has been to surface dress or just build up the layers over time. And what we haven't started with is a well-designed road with good foundations and good drainage as you have in the trunk road network. So it would be much more difficult for us to look at, the kind of maintenance and contract agreements. Certainly if there's failures in the surfacing, we would look for external contractors to come back and remedy that. But it's not that we could set a guarantee for a particular number of years, because we're not dealing with maybe possibly deeper rooted problems, foundation issues or drainage issues adequately.
By the explanations you've given so far, I would say it's a case of more investment to improve the actual indicators. However, do you see the process of the first time fix for the patch being something that could improve the indicators? Are there other processes that you feel we should be looking to implement that may improve our indicators, which would mean the money there wasn't as the only way to do it, but there's other things we could be doing?
as with any data sets, there are ways to do things that you can manipulate the data that you might get in the short term a better result. And one of the ways of actually dealing with, say in the shorter term, if you were just out to get a better performance indicator, would be to do a lot of surface dressing works. So we can maybe do 4 or 5 times as much surface dressing on a square area basis as kind of medium level thickness overlay surfacing schemes. And what that might do is deal with all the areas where we have cracking that that the indicator's picking up. And again, it's a good treatment in places to seal the carriageway where we have cracking. But if we moved a lot of the kind of structural investment into, say, surface dressing, we could maybe, you could almost massage the figures slightly, and in the short term, you might get a much better indicator because you're covering up a lot of the problems. So I think historically, we've always tried to have this balance between the different treatment approaches so that we're still undertaking surfacing schemes where we need to build strength up again, and that helps us in the longer term to kind of hold the indicator and the kind of residual life in the road, and then balance that with the kind of surface dressing approach as well when that's appropriate. So there's always been a bit of a play between the two kind of areas of funding for the surfacing and the surface dressing, and in some years one has gone up, the other's gone down. And we've tried to kind of balance that out. What we also tend to do with the surface dressing is that some of the surfacing schemes might be a material that is particularly does well. If we don't go with hot rolled asphalt where we've got a chip in the surface, we might go with a dense bitumen macadam surface coat. But what's probably quite good is to come back within 2 or 3 years and actually seal that with a surface dressing so that we've done the strengthening, and then in a number of years' time when that's weathered in and we can get good adhesion, we come back with a surface dressing scheme and seal the whole thing up and get a good aggregate on top for kind of skid resistance. So I think the approaches that we take are probably quite good. I know that colleagues in DG First are looking at making sure that across the region that the value for money we get on the materials side is looked at quite robustly just now in terms of what quarries can supply us with by material types. And for these kind of surfacing schemes, they will be looking to simplify it to reduce the number of treatments that might have been happening across the area, where we can get an optimum price out of particular quarries. If we suddenly go from 3 treatments to 1 and the volume of production can go up, or we know in discussion with the quarry that we can get better value if we go for, we simplify the manufacturing, the production process for the asphalts. In terms of the first time permanent, I think, again, it will take a bit of time, and the fact that that's taking them longer, we will see carriageway repair performance dipping, and and hopefully we'll see that pick up again. But I think we're all kind of agreed in terms of an approach as a council that reducing the number of revisits to make a repair again and again is what we want to try and avoid in terms of ineffectiveness, and that the first time permanent repair is the way that we want to go ahead. And again, there are a number of different ways that can be done in terms of repair techniques. And again, it's DG First have kind of resourced up with more hot boxes, more small hot boxes, larger hot boxes for depots so that they can have access to a lot more material and get through repairs quicker. You're probably aware of the jet patcher, the kind of spray and chip, and then there's a place for that in terms of the repair process, as well as kind of digging out, making good edges and contract patching. So I think we're quite happy with the kind of range of tools that are available to DG First. They do kind of keep heads up on kind of new products that come on the market, but none have really convinced us that they're any better in terms of investment, apart from obviously the jet patcher was probably something a number of years ago we decided was probably a good route to go down.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at the appendix, on carriageway condition, and looking at the short trend and the long trend. Now, while it's indicated in there that in the short trend there's improvement, you're actually indicating almost generally that there will be a downward trend on the long trend. Would you sort of just care to sort of give me some details on that?
I think the long-term trend, I think as I said, was if I'm going back to this survey that we undertake every year, this is the Scottish Road Maintenance Condition Survey, and all of the authorities in Scotland participate in it, as well as Transport Scotland, so that we have this consistent SPI data that we can rank ourselves against them and look at performance across the country. And so I'm looking back at data from about 8-9, financial year 8-9, so I'm looking at about 5 years worth of data, and I would agree that the trend is for, over that period of time that there has been a deterioration in the carriageway condition. It's probably not helped by the fact that part of the way through the process we also had a bit of a change to the way that the SPI was measured, and that probably produced some short-term blips in the data. But I think there's enough data before and after that we are looking at a level of deterioration on the whole of the network. But again, as I said, that's principally to do with the U-class roads, which take up about 42% of our network, and the fact that we're not, there isn't a high level of investment compared to the kind of targeted funding on the A and B class elements of the network. So there we're seeing a bit of the deterioration rate being stopped and turned around, but not on the U-class roads. We're seeing that kind of level of deterioration continue. And it comes back to this kind of difference between what we reckoned a number of years ago was the steady state figure to hold the performance indicator across the whole network at about a £10 million level investment against what we decided, what the council came to conclusion was affordable in terms of capital investment strategy of about £6 million per annum.
Supplementary, yes.
Yes, please. Just on that basis, you're saying that, obviously we decide a figure, and that actually just arrives at keeping the road conditions mainly as they are. What sort of figures needed to actually affect an improvement? I mean, I take the point you're making that a lot of the stuff is perhaps on our unclassified or B-classified roads, but what's actually needed to actually affect an improvement?
Again, it comes down to how much of an improvement we're trying to target. If we wanted to hold the rate of deterioration, you'd be looking at £10 million per annum investment. There is a calculation that's done that we've reported a number of times to Planning, Housing and Environment Services Committee called the backlog calculation for our network. And effectively, it would be the figure that would be required over a year's period, although you couldn't actually spend it over a year's period, to take all of your, effectively to turn your SPI into the optimum figure, and to wipe out all of the defects. What tends to happen is that a number of parameters are measured with the machine survey. So we're looking at texture depth, we're looking at rutting in the wheel track, deformation, we're looking at variation in longitudinal profile, kind of bumpiness of the road, and we're looking at cracking in the road surface. And there are a number of parameters applied as to what's acceptable, requires maintenance or unacceptable, and we effectively turn the road network into red, amber, green. And the PI is those red and amber elements of the network where the thresholds against any of these criteria fall out with acceptable, or with the tolerances that are set as in good condition. So what tends to happen is that the red and amber elements, the red is that element of the network crudely that should be maintained now, the amber is that element of the network that should be looked at for maintenance, and the green section is that element of the network that's in good condition. Now, the PI itself is the red and amber elements of the network, so effectively we're saying that for the PI, 48.6% of the network is in the red and the amber. Now, they calculate a figure to make that figure go to zero, that would be take everything out of the red and the amber in terms of a level of maintenance, and the backlog figure for that is about £200 million for the whole network. Now, that's just been calculated this year. In previous years, it was a much lower figure, but they've kind of revisited the method of calculation and brought the price bases up. So in current prices, we're looking at about £200 million to remove all the red and the amber from the network, and it would take your 48.6% KPI figure down to SPI figure down to effectively zero. It doesn't deal with the defects that are still in the green part of the network that are still considered to be intolerable limits.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Joel?
Sorry, can I come in just on the back of what Ted was asking? I think, am I right in thinking it was 112 million or something like that last year? There was a figure that we were given, so therefore £10 million a year would sort of keep it on a level keel. So if we're up to 200, you're saying it's an additional 10 million on top of what you've got already. Is that what you're saying?
The backlog calculation figures, in 2009, the figure that was calculated nationally for us And again, it was a national exercise for all the local roads authorities. We were looking at just over £100 million, £106 million was the backlog figure in 2009. 2011, we were looking at £116 million. There was a bit of a change in the way that the backlog calculation was made for the 2013 figures, and there was changes in kind of the assumptions and parameters and how that backlog figure was calculated. So for the whole of the country, it took a bit of a leap, but our figure went up to about £206 million. What I don't have, as you pointed out, is the equivalent figure of the per annum investment to have the steady state position. But that's something that we could revisit.
It would be fair to say then that, you know, in your view, the road. So it would be fair to say that in your view, the roads network in Dumfries and Galloway is grossly underfunded.
I would say that there's evidence to support the fact that there's underfunding in the road maintenance against the backlog figure, and where we look at our performance indicator in relation to other authorities in the country.
So in other words, it ultimately becomes a matter of political choice, or you know, with a small p, I hasten to add, on the part of elected members. Now, let me put it to you that, you know, would you accept that there's a lack of focus on the various. I often wonder what the man and the woman in the street who ultimately pay for this feel about all of this different categories that we talk about: roads maintenance, roads improvement, and all the rest of it. Because I know that, you know, as an elected member, and I talk with members of my peer group, and they're of the same view, that by and large, you know, they have difficulty getting their heads around all the sort of different schemes, all the sort of different methods of funding, etc. And the point I'm making is, would you accept that there's a case, in fact, for simplifying the presentation of just exactly what categories, you know, that you're proposing to deal with, and the resource implications of these, to give us a better understanding of just exactly the global sum, you know, that's involved. You know, in other words, I'm not trying to elide the elected member's responsibility, but it would help, in fact, to get it perhaps more starkly and more simplistically spelled out to us.
I think for the level of investment, it's probably an appropriate level of information that we have. It's not. I mean, the information that's presented here, and I was reflecting and preparing for this session that it would probably have lent itself to some graphics, and certainly I've had to produce some graphics just to get my head around what I wanted to say this afternoon to the committee. And it can be put across in a graphical way, and we can go through the figures. I think at the end of the day, we're still kind of saying it's the same picture that we're presenting as we have done in recent years, except that more recently there's a bit of a kick up in those areas that we've increased the funding on.
Can I come back there, Stephen, and make it abundantly clear to you? I'm not criticising the presentation of the report today. What I'm saying to you is that, you know, I personally prefer narrative to graphics, but that's another story. But at the end of the day, the point I'm making to you is that, in fact, if we could get the information as simplistically but as compellingly as possible at the time that we're arguing for the resource allocations, perhaps that would help. Or do you feel that could possibly help, in fact, to achieving a higher priority for resourcing for your particular service? That's really my apologies for not making it clear.
I'm obviously quite active in the Capital Investment Strategy Group that brings reports to the Policy and Resources Committees for agreement of the kind of high-level allocations. And I'm aware that I'm competing against many others that have similar issues with their asset groups. I have obviously strong views on the roads and infrastructure asset in terms of levels of investment, but these need to be tempered against, as you say, the kind of political with a small p priorities for investment across the council of a whole, and what is affordable. And certainly I'm quite happy to continue to feed in the information to the process about what the need is, but it's for other officers in consultation with each other and ultimately committee to determine what the appropriate investment is.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions you want to put to Stephen? Well, can I thank you for your attendance and for your explanations. I'll go back to the point that Ted has already flagged up. What you're doing with the resources that you're getting in the short term is, as far as I'm concerned, is commendable to say the least. More than commendable. But the worry is looking at the far right column and the long trend. You know, invariably from performance information data that's shown there, with one exception, it's all heading downwards, and that must in fact be a cause for concern for us. So I'd like to think that perhaps you'll maybe be arguing your case for additional resourcing at the time of the next budget setting with renewed vigour. That's that's obviously only my own personal view, but it is particularly for those of us that represent not only rural wards, but I mean it's some of the state of some of the roadways and the more urban parts of the region leave a lot to be desired as well. And I feel that colleagues who represent more urban areas have a perfectly legitimate cause for complaint as well, saying, look, these roads are not acceptable and we've really got to get something done about that. But as I say, thank you for your attendance, thank you for your explanations. We'll take it from there. I've been told that lunch has been brought, but I'm minded to move on. Would you agree with me? And perhaps when we're having a debrief for this meeting, we'll maybe revisit at 10 o'clock starts in appropriate circumstances. But that's for another day. Can I ask Richard Grieveson and his colleagues to come in, please? Thanks, Richard. Punctuality is always a virtue. Richard, we invited you to come along today, as it were, to explain, the implications behind, the sort of performance information, the KPI data and the SPI data that, have been assembled for your service. Page 26 of 64 is essentially what we're talking about, flagged up there. Sport and leisure management, museum services and use of libraries, basically. And we'd like to speak with you about certain of the symbols there. I think the concerns that some of those would raise us as a consequence. So, for instance, the first one, number of attendances in relation to sport and leisure management, is a warning, and then there's a red alert further down, museum services, etc. And further on down, there's a warning logo as well in relation to the use of the libraries, and we'd like to discuss with you why, perhaps to have amplification from you as to why, in fact, this should be the case, and more importantly, how we feel we can best address the situation with a view to turning it round.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just introduce to members Annie Thompson from the Libraries team, who's come along with me today to help and support me in that area of the business. If I could start, if I may, with the SPI in relation to council-funded or part-funded museums. Perhaps just give a brief update in relation to that, the leisure and sport one and libraries, and then maybe just before we go to questions, Chair, very briefly, just talk a little bit about the strategic element of how we might move forward in terms of the information that we've been provided with. In terms of the visits to and usage of council-funded and part-funded museums, for clarification purposes, that also includes, or is defined as, the museums and galleries. So it includes Gracefield Toll Booth, CD Art Gallery facilities as well. It's quite a far-reaching and extensive SPI. Members will note that it's the loans, inquiries, outreach visits and relevant website hits. The good news is that in terms of actual physical attendances, there's been a modest decrease. Predominantly, we would suggest as a result of the very good summer. A lot of museums attendees it's a wet weather attraction, but that's a sort of very modest decrease that we're monitoring closely. The significant challenge we've had here is in relation, as the text refers to, is the websites, the two arts websites, which are hosted on behalf of the council by an external provider, who changed their web analysis software without informing us as such. So we have an issue there that I've asked for an investigation into, with a view to resolving matters prior to the next report coming back to members. So it's not so much as an issue in terms of usage, but more of a method of accounting, and there's clearly an issue there that we need to get to the bottom of and resolve in terms of that external partner hosting the the website. If anything, it's highlighted the frailties of the system that I certainly wasn't aware of. So we're looking to deal with that, and I'm happy to bring reports back in terms of how we will address that. In terms of the leisure and sport SPIs, swimming attendances, first one slightly down against budget and against the targets values that were established. Minor decreases in the Statutory and in the Wigton area. Again, swimming provision, given that these figures are up to the end of August, a very good summer, that tends to have an impact on attendances at these facilities. Nithsdale experiencing a greater decrease, predominantly due to the challenges and problems we're having at DG1 and the training pool and the time that was out of use. And a decline in Allendale and Eskdale, which I have to say is again an amendment to the previous recording mechanism that the council inherited from the previous trust, whereby activities such as pipe band championships were included as part of swimming pool facilities, partly because the attendees were monitored from that site. So we've rectified that, but that's the reason why there's a challenge for us moving forward. The dry side, the indoor sports facilities, again slightly down against target in 3 of the 4 areas. Audit Scotland, PricewaterhouseCoopers did some work with us in relation to these figures, and again we've made some changes into the way to what make up those figures. Spectators and outdoor pitches have been taken out and are no longer included in the way that those figures are collated, which has had a knock-on effect. The flip side is that Nithsdale has increased, predominantly due to the number of major events that we've had at the indoor facilities, particularly the Ice Bowl and DG1, which have offset that. Perhaps if I may, Chair, just hand over to Annie to speak, particularly in relation to the libraries element, and then I'll quickly sum up in terms of the strategic element and how we're looking to take things forward.
Thank you. I think attendances at libraries have declined both in terms of physical attendance and virtual visits. Physical attendances are dropping nationally, and we're in line with that trend, although we have had some closures for refurbishment over the past sort of 6 months, which has obviously affected the physical visit figures. I think the most significant drop that we're looking at the moment, though, is the virtual visits. Virtual visits are made up of use of our e-book service, access to online reference sources, so that's likes of Encyclopaedia Britannica and Oxford Online, as well as Ancestry UK. Use of our online library catalogue, so that's for browsing the catalogue region-wide, renewing and requesting books, and also access to a website that we have called Dumfries and Galloway Through the Lens, which allows people to view and purchase old pictures of Dumfries and Galloway. The drop that we see in the use of virtual visits is down to access to the online catalogue. We are looking into this further, and I think Richard's going to talk about the strategic approach, but I think in terms of integration and also looking at the way that we use mobile libraries, there's something that we can do in that respect in terms of increasing usage of our online catalogue. It is giving people access from home across the region to the whole catalogue rather than being limited to the physical library that they attend.
Thanks, Annie. I think one of the main points to make, if I may, through you, Chair, is the fact that certainly the PIs, both the SPIs and the key performance indicators, are things that we absolutely need and require to be fit for purpose, because they are influencing the way that we're delivering the services as members would expect. That's particularly key in terms of the likes of the service review programme, which is currently ongoing, and we've definitely been using our performance information to influence the various options that will be presented to elected members as part of the service review programme for both leisure and sport facilities and arts and museums, and they'll be forthcoming to members through a seminar in October and the Policy and Resources Committee in November. So it's really important that the figures are robust and the processes are robust, and that's why I'm particularly disappointed in where we are in terms of the external website provider in the arts, but we will deal with that. There's also a need to evidence strategic developments, and the need for strategic developments not only in terms of the likes of the sports facilities review and the facilities planning model, which for argument's sake has suggested and evidenced the need for the likes of full-size 3G sports pitches driven through a sports development need, but there's obviously a need for us to ensure that we monitor usage of other facilities to see how those facilities may well impact on the likes of the smaller multi-use games areas, etc. And that also needs to be built into the process. So there's some operational challenges that again will all be built into the service review. In terms of libraries, we're absolutely developing a vision for the future in terms of integration. And whilst there's been some short-term challenges, the philosophy, the ethos around increasing footfall from those facilities and services being provided together, we feel is sound, but will absolutely need to be monitored through the performance management process. And as Annie's mentioned, mobile libraries. We're just in the process of updating one of our mobile libraries and getting a new vehicle. That for us has got to be now around a mobile customer service centre. We're going to include Wi-Fi in those facilities that we haven't had before, so we can take services out to customers and deliver things differently, because our performance information is telling us that actually traditional libraries and traditional ways of delivering these services are perhaps not what the customer wants anymore. So I think an assurance I would hope I can give members is that we're using this information to inform and influence how we might look to change the way that services are delivered in the future.
Any comments, any points you want to make, Rush or Anne at the moment? Dan?
Yeah, I just want to go back to the library services part of it, where both the short and long-term trends are showing a decline. Now, you actually talked about a catalogue. A problem with that. Could you actually just go into that in a little bit more detail so that I can understand what it is you're talking about?
The online library catalogue allows library members to browse our entire book stock from home or from anywhere with an internet access. They can also request an item to be delivered to their library of choice if they want to read it, and they can renew their books online. And we've seen a decline in the use of that service.
I mean, is there a particular reason for that decline? Was it, because the catalogue itself wasn't any good, or was the response time, or, what was it?
That's something that we're looking into at the moment and just trying to find out. I think possibly there's a lack of awareness that the catalogue exists, and that how sort of greater access it does give you to the items that we have within the library service, because it is avoiding restriction, if you like. It lets you look at the entire catalogue, doesn't matter where you are. It lets you have access to any item in the catalogue. As I say, it would be delivered to your own home, but I think it's probably a lack of awareness.
Yeah, just to sort of move on a little and talk about the mobile library service. I think Richard alluded to the fact that you want to take the service to the customer rather than the customer coming to the centre where it's provided. And you talked there about the use of internet facilities. Again, I'm interested to know how that actually operates. Do you go to a location and stay there for a while, or what?
At the moment, there's a bit of a combination in terms of the way that mobile libraries operate. They visit some locations, some farm places, for example, where there is only one house, if you like. But we also visit smaller communities where there isn't a static library at the moment. We are actually, as Richard said, about to start a review of the whole mobile library service. At the moment, there is no internet facility on any of the vans. We're replacing one of them at the moment, and we're investigating the potential for including Wi-Fi, and that can be achieved in either one of two ways, which is either via satellite dish attached to the top of the van, or using a mobile phone and a wireless dongle to pick up a signal. So we're looking to find out what the most reliable method is, and obviously cost effective.
Want to add to that, anything, Richard?
Chair, just very briefly, I think that the library service is something that's new to me. I think there's evidence here, in part, where we're currently providing facilities and services based on historical need, as opposed to having evidence of where that actual need is and what the service is provided. That's what we're looking at in terms of the review of some of these services, to make sure it's fit for purpose and meets the needs of the communities here and now.
Thanks, Stephen Angel.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually reassured by just your last comment there, Richard, because I was about to ask on the back of Ted's question, just, are these services being, is it a lack of awareness, or is there the evidence of need in the first place that's affecting the figures for the use of these services? So, but my actual question originally was to do with the measuring of website data. So it's really just a simple question, as in, do we know which data is actually the correct one to look at?
In terms of the information that we've been provided with by this external provider, they've changed the web analysis software. So basically, we've had the new software has recorded a lower number, and that's what we've now been presented with, as opposed to what we believe is that the previous website, which collated figures in a different way. So it's a statistical issue that we have to get to the bottom of.
Okay, no, I appreciate that, but I take it we've got no idea, have we been looking at have we understood, in the past that was the correct data that reflected the sort of usage, as it were, or are we now looking at a more correct figure that just needs a wee bit further explanation?
No, I think that we're just talking about the website hits, and we're talking about the previous information that we provided with detailed what we believe were the correct number of hits that we were receiving. What we've seen as a result of them changing the software is a significant reduction. So we haven't got to the bottom of it yet, Stephen, but we're certainly working on it. And we're of the view that previously we were correct, and now all of a sudden we've seen a reduction. So we think the initial figures were correct, and we now need to get to the bottom of it.
Before I ring John, what sort of timescale are you postulating to get to the bottom of it?
I've tasked my colleagues, who as we speak are liaising with the host company. I want this right by the time we report back. So by the next reporting cycle, I'm hoping that we'll no longer be reporting an exception report, because we'll have got the figures correct.
John?
Thank you. It's probably a really stupid question, but you talked about renewing your books online. Is that if you wish to keep the books that you've already got, or are we talking about people who are maybe taking material for their Kindles? I mean, I don't know, I just wondered.
Yes, it's about renewing the books that you already have, so you can renew them, I think, 3 times, and before we ask to see the item back again. If e-books automatically self-destruct after the loan period, they disappear from your device.
Okay, thanks. Richard?
It's just a question about the digitisation of archives. There's quite a lot of archives in the Dumfries Library which will be useful to users in Annan and in the West as well. How far down of digitising your records are you?
I think that's a resource issue. There's a mass of archive material, and we are trying to digitise as much as we can, but it falls within the remit of Graham Roberts, who's our archivist, who's also working on the move to the archive centre, the HLF bid, for the bigger archive centre, and it's quite a small team. So it is something that we are looking at and we are trying to get done, but it's a slow process.
Okay, the other reports, Richard? No, going back to page 26. Do you wish to add anything further?
Apologies, Chair. I'm not sure I've got anything else further to add, Chair, in terms of the Arts Museums, Leisure Sport and the library's reports, but again, happy to take questions.
Any questions on any of these? Okay, well, we'll thank both Annie and yourself for your attendance and explanations and answers to the questions. That's appreciated. Come back to the body of the report, colleagues. You'll see that paragraph 2. We're being asked to review the overall summary of performance set out in Appendix 1. Linking to 3.5, the exception reports at Appendix 2 and the detailed information at Appendix 3 and scrutinise the performance of the Council as reported. Liz?
It would be helpful just if I could summarise what we've taken to be the improvements that colleagues have identified, the reasons why the SPIs have improved. Early intervention was certainly one message that came through, particularly in the homelessness, where they're anticipating any issues. That process change, perhaps the need, where there was a statutory change and they didn't need to obtain information from a number of other sources. So the process was streamlined, and that certainly helped improve performance. Prioritisation or increased investment, and we heard about that in terms of the roads. Prevention work, about having a programme of repairs over a long period of time that's intended to deal with issues over a period of the project. And increased promotion or increased usage of facilities, for example, about where we were holding more events in the Ice Bowl. So these 5 areas seem to be the ones that came through about why performance had improved. And in terms of declining, there was external factors, I think, in a number of the leisure and cultural ones where the weather had an impact. Unavailability of service was another area which had affected our performance, DG1 in the libraries being refurbished, for example, and changing customer use, and that was seen to be, there's a national trend there where people are not using physical libraries. And I think we've also picked up a number of the performance recording and reporting issues about the targets, about how data is recorded, and the example Richard's just given you about the arts information, and indeed the integration of Annandale and SDO Trust. And finally, I think that the criteria for some of the SPIs changed, where they couldn't count outdoor spectators. So there are some criteria, some performance recording issues that have affected that as well.
Any comments to make the points that Liz has raised? No? Okay. So we've reviewed the overall summary of performance. We've noted that the overall performance is generally consistent with last year's results. 40 of the 51 key performance indicators that the Council collects have already been reviewed by service committees as part of the Director's end of year reports and the business plans. And 2.3, note the arrangements for reporting this performance to Audit Scotland and the people of Dumfries and Galloway, who are arguably the most important persons of all in the process. Okay? Right.
Although Donna Maxwell isn't here, I think it would be appropriate to record just the sheer volume of work.
Maxwell is here.
Oh, Donna, you're back in. I couldn't see you. I think it's appropriate to record that just the sheer volume of work that Donna has put in to getting this information ready and submitting it to Audit Scotland, and also just in that last point there about the work currently ongoing about broadcast that you'll see coming through in due course. So thank you.
Can I say for the record that, you know, when I spoke to the report that Donna Mouse presented earlier on, I did pay tribute. It wasn't just to Donna Mouse. I made it clear that it was to tribute, you know, to all of our staff for the amount of time, work and effort that they're putting into this process. So that's not being defensive, but just to you know, make it clear that, you know, the efforts of all are appreciated. Item number 8 is benchmarking within Dumfries and Galloway and the local government benchmarking framework. Heather, you're presenting this report, please.
Thank you. I've got just a brief report that's presenting an update on what we used to refer to as the Solace Benchmarking Project, which has now been adopted and is mainstreamed into business as usual. So when you hear about the local government benchmarking framework, it is what we used to call Solace Benchmarking Project, so just so that we're not confused about the two. I really just want to provide just a couple of updates following discussions I've had with the Improvement Service Lead on the framework since the time of writing the report. Firstly, at paragraph 2.3, I mentioned there that the benchmarking clubs are going to be starting during October. The Improvement Service Lead was saying to me just earlier this week that they're going to be launching these during October as planned with a learning event, and invites will be extended to representatives from the family groups to come to actually learn about the process, how it works, what their roles and expectations are, and just really to launch the process. Initially, they're going to focus in on 2 indicators, one being around positive destinations and the other, quite aptly, because we've been hearing about it already today, the roads indicators. So they're really going to dig into the process there and just really understand the extent of the work, and that will help them outline and inform a schedule for the rest of the family groups moving forward. The other area that was highlighted as well was at paragraph 3.5, starting next steps, we speak about the task groups that were carried out during the summer, and indeed we were very active in those task groups. There's a plan for subsequent task groups to take place later on this year. I was advised that what they're actually doing in advance of bringing the task groups together is they're engaging with professional associations to get their input in respect of the children's indicators and the culture and leisure indicators in particular. So they'll do that engagement first and then start speaking to the appropriate people within local authorities. In respect of our benchmarking approach within Dumfries and Galloway Council, I think actually today's agenda has been, for me, a fantastic demonstration of you're seeing benchmarking happening for real. So it was actually quite good that I was able to witness some of that rather than just sit and try to give you an assurance that we're doing these things. I think the agenda today has been evidence of his actually participating firsthand in real benchmarking activity. The first 2 speakers that are obviously involved in the scrutiny review of training and development. Indeed, what's that all about if it's not been, actual real benchmarking happening? And you could see following some of the discussion how we're really using that information to inform our improvement and change activities. And indeed, through the SPI report that we were just listening to, we heard firsthand from our colleagues from Community and Customer Services there how they're actually using this real benchmarking information to inform their service reviews that they're bringing forward. So I was quite pleased to actually witness that happening rather than me just sitting trying to give you the assurance that benchmarking for improvement is actually happening. It's not just a case of number crunching in league tables. We are actually moving to a position where there is real benchmarking for improvement activity happening within the council. So those were really just the points that I just wanted to highlight in addition to the report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Heather. Any questions? Ted?
Yeah, just on 2.3, the actual clubs that Dumfries and Galloway is placed in. Can you just expand on the reasons why they're in these particular groups?
Yeah, certainly. It has been subject to quite a bit of discussion. You'll remember, I'm sure it was around this time last year when there was some initial family groups identified by the Improvement Service, and there was a consultation with local authorities about the family groupings, and we'd got back in respect of those with some comments, and the Improvement Service had effectively another go at creating family groupings, and they've carried out a lot of analysis and research into how best to come up with the groupings, and essentially what they've decided to do is split the indicators between people type indicators and other services, and the main factors that influenced the family groups were in respect of people services, the people type indicators. It was the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation that, so that was looked at and analysed, and that's how we've been placed in the group, and Group 3 there for people services, and in respect of Club 2, which are the more environmental type indicators, what the key informer for those groups has been the population dispersion. So they've used the GAE to inform the groupings for those indicators.
So in Club 2, beneath Highland, what is that?
I'd have to say it's reassuring to realise, in fact, that there was a fair degree of methodology put into assembling the family groups, and that's very helpful. Any other questions? Can we go to section 2 of the report then? Members are asked to note the progress of the local government benchmarking framework as detailed at section 3 and the Council's approach to benchmarking as outlined in the appendix. And I would hope we would note them. And let me say for the record that I found the appendix particularly helpful because it's a term that, I've got to be honest and say that, a lot of people use, and I've used it myself from time to time, i.e. the term of benchmarking. I've never been totally sure as to just exactly what we mean. And I now have a much better understanding of it, having read the appendix and sort of scribbled all over it. So thank you for that. Item number 9, scrutiny, review and performance indicators. Actions and next steps.
Thank you, Chair. This just summarises where you've got to in this particular review and highlights that we have 5 things that we are currently arranging as the final stages. You're going to view appropriate items from Edinburgh City Council's committee, and we'll arrange for that to be a visual presentation at a suitable date. We've got some background information to give you for your folder just to complete the data information. We're arranging a roundtable event for yourselves with chairs and vice chairs of committees, and we've also invited NHS, Dumfries and Galloway and Covalent to come along and give you a presentation and have a question and answer session with you. So these arrangements are all looking for the dates to be confirmed, and we'll obviously intimate that to you as soon as possible.
Thanks very much. Any questions or comments on the terms of the report? No? Okay, well, I can note, we'll go to section 2.1, note the progress and the actions taken for the scrutiny review, and section 2.2, agree the next steps for the review as detailed in the annexed appendix to which Liz has already spoken. Agreed? Well, thank you all for your attendance and more importantly your input. You've now got about 6 minutes, if my watch is correct, to get through there, but if the gannets haven't been there already, get something to eat and get back